fly fisher. Ruth is looking forward to enjoying Truckee for the next 40 years and beyond. Welcome, Ruth. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm very happy to be here. Sorry for making you read all that.
No problem. Okay, next, due to the resignation of Nikki Riley from the Planning Commission, we now have an opening for Commission Chair. Should we wait till Jerusha gets here? Can we move this agenda item?
You could, though we're not sure that Jerusha will actually make it. She had to head down the hill this afternoon, so we're not sure she'll be here. You could elect to postpone it to next month if you wanted to, and then you would be continuing to act as acting chair for this evening.
Can we just put it on the tail end of tonight's meeting in the hopes that she shows up?
We could do that too if you'd like.
Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay, so we'll table this for now.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so the next item is going to be 6.0, which is going to be the approval of minutes, the May 19, 2020 meeting minutes. This is the first of two sets of minutes that will need to be approved. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the May 19th regular meeting?
I move that we approve the May 19th regular meeting minutes.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstain? Okay, motion carries. Okay, moving on to the June 16th, 2020 meeting minutes. This is the second of two sets of minutes that we need to approve. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 16th, 2020.
Do I hear a second?
I will second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Motion carries. Okay, and on to the meat of the sandwich here. So tonight's agenda item 7.1 is for the Soaring Ranch tentative map time extension, application number 2020-35. If you would like to submit a public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555 or email planningdepartment@townoftruckee.com now. Are there any commissioner recusals or disclosures? Okay, the staff presentation will be done tonight by Laura. Laura?
Good afternoon, commissioners. So, we'll start out with a little orientation here for those who aren't familiar with the Soaring Ranch specific plan and the Soaring Ranch project. It's here, this parcel in red. This is Highway 267 and Brockway Road. A closer up view of the project site is here, and here's where it fits into the specific plan area. It's the piece in red here that's the regional commercial zoning. In March 2018, the council approved a development permit to construct a grocery store and retail space in the phase 1 of the development, a plan development for the overall site plan, and a tentative map to subdivide the parcel into 3 parcels for future development. This is the tentative map showing those 3 parcels. So parcel 1 up here is where you've probably seen the new Rayleigh's store and the commercial space here that's currently under construction. And then phases 2 and 3 would be the future development. The applicant submitted a time extension application in March requesting to extend the tentative map by 1 year. They requested that to give them time to complete the construction of phase 1 and address the remaining conditions of approval that were specific to parcel map recordation. As I mentioned, the commercial projects in phase 1 include the Rayleigh's store, which is now open, and Mountain Hardware, which also recently completed construction. And under the council resolution, there was a condition of approval that specified that the Planning Commission would be the future review authority for any projects and project amendments for Soaring Ranch, which is why this is coming to you. As I mentioned, a 1-year time extension is proposed. Up to 6 years is the maximum time that's allowed under the Subdivision Map Act. And prior to the parcel map recordation, there were a number of infrastructure requirements that needed to be met that were in that council resolution in 2018. Engineering went through all of the previous conditions of approval, identified those that had been addressed through the phase 1 development, and we incorporated all the applicable outstanding conditions into the new commission resolution. And as a New development, the parcel map application was actually submitted the other day on July 17th to complete the subdivision process. So the map would have expired in March. They just needed a little extra time to get that in, and it's now moving forward. The tentative map findings, there's only 3 that need to be met. Essentially that there's no changes to the general plan, specific plan, or development code that would make the subdivision inconsistent with those plans. That there have been no changes to the character of the site and its surroundings that affect how the policies apply to the project, and no changes to capacity of community services. So the staff recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2020-11, determining the project exempt from CEQA per Section 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines, and approving a 1-year time extension for the previously approved Soaring Ranch tentative map based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. The commission could also continue the hearing to a date and time certain, require additional environmental review, add, modify, or eliminate any of the conditions of approval, or deny the time extension if you believe that the findings cannot be made. If you take action today on this application, the appeal period would end on July 31st at 5 p.m. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I believe remotely we also have Rob Wood, the agent for the project, who could also answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, so let's go ahead and move into the applicant presentation and then circle back with questions.
So I believe he's not giving a presentation, he's just available for questions.
Oh, got it. Very good. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff?
If we approve this extension, are they allowed to apply for another extension in the future?
Technically, they could have up to 6 years, but since they've also already submitted their parcel map for review, it looks like that is moving forward at the same time that the extension would be granted.
Any other questions, Dan? Susie, do you have any questions?
I don't, let's see, I have 2 very quick questions. Can you show me, can you pull up that map and sort of indicate where the bike facilities that aren't built are? Does that make sense?
Scott Mathod is the engineer who helped with this project. He's participating remotely, so he might be able to identify that. I'm not sure if they're shown on this particular diagram.
I think the color one has some, like, bike lane in pink. I don't know if that, no, not that one, sorry.
Yeah, that one just
Okay.
shows the zoning.
I can skip it, that's fine. I don't want to, gum up the works. And then, is there any way that we could require a slightly better job at retaining mature trees in the parking lot in the future for the second phase of this project?
Yeah, so that would be parcel 2 here, would be the next phase of development that would be coming before the commission. They actually do have an application in now that will be coming to you sometime in the next few months. So as part of that, when you're reviewing the site design, if there's interior landscaping that you think would be a good idea to try to retain some existing trees, then potentially that's something that you could bring up as part of that development review.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Susie? Great. Ruth, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, before we move into deliberation, I'd like to remind everybody in the public, if they would like to make public comment, to please submit or call or text 530-428-6555 or by email at planningdepartment@townoftruckee.com. Okay, let's move into deliberations. Susie, would you like to start?
I have no comments.
Dan, Commissioner Freeman?
Same, no comments, no questions.
Ruth?
Same here.
Do I hear a motion on the floor?
I motion to approve the item. Oh, sorry here. Adopt Resolution 2020-11, determining the project exempt from CEQA, and approving the 1-year time extension for the previously approved Soaring Ranch tentative map.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Carissa, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall is not here, Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to take a very short recess before we move into the next agenda item. It is 4:17. Let's meet back here at 4:20. Thank you. Okay, let's call the meeting back to order. And the next item, well, I believe that we have a general comment. Is that correct? We had an audio challenge before, but we do have a general comment. Carissa, you want to address that?
We do, thank you. Public comment from Matt Miller. His comment was, is that gigantic, very bright red and yellow Truckee Moody sign really necessary downtown? Matt Miller, Truckee.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move into the next agenda item, which is 8.1. Is consideration of a use permit, zoning clearance, and sign plan for floater with a motor. Application number 2020-11. Laura will be presenting again for us. Again, if you would like to submit public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555 or by email at planningdepartment@townoftruckee.com now. Are there any commissioner recusals or disclosures? Staff have anything to add? No.
Can I add a quick? I did. I spoke with a previous employee of the boat ramp. I don't know if that's a disclosure that needs to happen or not, but there you go.
Thank you. I did received a phone call from Rob Nishimori, who has entered public comment, and chatted with him about the project. Any other recusals or disclosures? Okay. Let's move into the staff presentation. Laura?
Okay, so I thought we would start this one off just talking a little about the Planning Commission role and some major discussion topics. So the review authority for the project, the Planning Commission role is to review the proposed development of the project site and look at that in terms of compliance with the town's policies and development standards. That includes site design, compatibility with adjacent land uses, consistency with the development code and general plan, and that applies to the project site and not to operations of the other facilities that are under the purview of other agencies. And it also doesn't address the broader policies related to Donner Lake that have been established by the town council. So the major discussion topics that we identified were related to the size and operating characteristics of the proposed use and whether that's appropriate for the project site, and whether the potential compatibility issues have been addressed through the proposed conditions of approval. This is the project site. It's two parcels here at the corner of Donner Lake Road and Donner Pass Road. The zoning's general commercial and the general plan land use designation is commercial. This is just sort of an area view to show the project site in relation to the public boat launch, and just for a point of reference, the West End Beach is over here. And here are some of the surrounding uses. You can see there's a mix of residential and commercial. And here's some photos of those. There's the Donner Lake gift shop is to the west, the ice cream shop is to the east. Behind the project site on one of those residential parcels is the Donner Lake Inn, and across the street is Donner Lake Village, which is where the Donner Lake Marina is located. This is the existing project site. It has an existing structure and some deteriorated asphalt. It was originally constructed, the structure was constructed for the Donner Lake Water Company back in 1974. It's all of 384 square feet, and we don't have any permits on file either under the county or the town showing that anything was ever approved to convert that structure to another use. In 2007, a previous property owner had the town's floodplain administrator make a determination on the Gregory Creek floodplain, which runs along the west side of the property. Based on the hydrology report and the study that was done to map the 100-year floodplain, the floodplain administrator determined that a 20-foot setback applied, and the survey showed that the existing structure is outside of that setback area. In October 2019, the current applicant submitted a preliminary application review submittal, and that was to explore a potential boat rental use on the site. And we identified that that use falls under the auto, mobile home, and vehicle sales definition, which includes rentals. You can see over here, it's retail establishments selling and or renting vehicles, including boats. That is a conditionally allowed use in the general commercial zoning district and requires a use permit by the Planning Commission. So with the current project, the applicant has submitted an application requesting approval of a use permit, zoning clearance, and sign plan to establish a seasonal boat rental business with one pontoon boat and one personal watercraft on the project site. And he proposes to use the existing building for office space and to do some improvements to the property for ADA access and repaving of the parking lot. In terms of the business operations, the boat rental business is proposed to operate from May to October, 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. As previously mentioned, there would be two watercraft. Those are proposed to be parked on the property on trailers and during the winter stored off-site. No on-site maintenance or refueling is proposed. All equipment for the boats would be stored on the boats, and the office space would include desk space, storage, and the ADA accessible restroom for customer use. And there's no concessions proposed for sale. Here's some pictures of the existing watercraft owned by the applicant. The pontoon boat seats up to 10 customers, and the personal watercraft seats up to 3. The business would be owner-operated with no employees, and the applicant lives within walking distance of the project site. The operations for the rentals would work primarily online, but if there's availability, walk-up rentals would be taken. The customer parking restrooms would be provided on the project site. Once the paperwork's completed, the customers would walk over to the boat ramp if they're using the boat on Donner Lake, and the staff person would trailer the boat over, help them launch it, and then return the trailer to park on the project site. And then when the rental period's done, that staff member would meet the customer back there, help them get the boat back on the trailer, return it to the property. The customers could walk back, retrieve their vehicles, and there's also plans to offer rental options for Lake Tahoe. In terms of the public boat launch, which is owned by the Truckee Donner Recreation and Park District, as you can see in the photo there, they reviewed the proposed project and they had no objections to the proposed use of the boat launch as described by the applicant. And to rent motorized watercraft for use on Donner Lake, business is required to obtain a boat rental permit from the Truckee Police Department. So I'll talk a little bit more about those agency approvals that are required a little later. So from the Planning Commission, the land use approvals that are requested are the use permit to permit the boat rental business in the general commercial zoning district, zoning clearance for project with less than 7,500 square feet and less than 2,600 square feet of site disturbance, and a sign plan for a new monument sign. The project site is in the commercial general plan land use designation. That applies to existing and planned areas of commercial uses, and it's also within the Donner Lake neighborhood area, which was established in the general plan to address the unique mix of land uses surrounding Donner Lake. The staff report included a lot of different policies that were applicable to the project, including land use, community character, and economic development, and some specific Donner Lake neighborhood area policies. So our opinion is that the project's consistent with the intent of the commercial general plan land use designation and the vision for the Donner Lake neighborhood area. Part of that is encouraging a mix of land uses to promote a vibrant community, support new visitor-oriented uses, and build on the town's existing assets. In terms of development code consistency, the automobile home and vehicle sales is an conditionally allowed use, as mentioned before, and that requires the use permit approval. The purpose of the use permit is to review a proposed land use activity that might be desirable in an applicable zoning district and could be compatible with adjacent uses, but the effects on the site and surroundings can't be determined before review of a particular location. So this is a consistency matrix that looks at some of the development standards and identifies that the setbacks, floor area ratios, site coverage, and open space are all consistent. Snow storage is not applicable because there is no winter use proposed. And then in terms of parking, the development code standard would be 3 spaces. What's proposed is 6 spaces for customer and employee parking and 2 spaces for boat parking. That's a recommendation from a parking study that was completed for the project. So that deviation from the standard parking calculation is something that the Planning Commission has the discretion to approve. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Site and building design. The floor plan was included in the staff report showing the layout of the business. The exterior modifications are proposed for the ADA accessibility, and the parking lot improvements would be the repaving and restriping and installing landscaping. ADA compliance, the restroom would need to be updated to meet the current ADA codes. There would need to be an ADA path of travel and a wheelchair accessible sales counter. So we recommended a condition of approval to require the compliance with all of those requirements through the building permit process. And as I mentioned, the parking standard in the development code would result in only 3 parking spaces. The way that standard is written, because the size of the structure is so small and there are not large outdoor sales areas like you would see with a car lot or something along those lines, that parking demand wasn't really applicable to the type of use that's proposed with this project. So we recommended that LSC transportation consultants do a parking analysis to look at the proposed use. Their analysis found that with a vehicle occupancy of 2.5 persons per vehicle, that would require 6 parking spaces, 5 for customers and 1 for employees. In addition to that, they would need the 2 boat parking spaces, which is where the 8 total spaces came from. And the commission, in the development code, it talks about how the development code standards should be the initial starting point for looking at the parking for a proposed use, but that the commission can require additional parking if it's appropriate. In terms of signage, 1 sign is proposed. There's an existing pole sign on the property, so the applicant's proposing to modify that to install a new pole sign. Using the existing structure, it would need to be modified to meet the height standards. In terms of the sign code standards, we found that the number of signs, size, lighting, landscaping, and materials and colors are all consistent. They would need to do some modifications to address the height, location, and the design. So we recommended condition number 29, which would require compliance with all of the sign code standards. Here's a consistency matrix from the code that shows where the sign is and isn't consistent. So 8 feet would be measured to the top of the sign. It was measured to the bottom of the sign in the sign plan submittal. The sign design didn't have any kind of 3D elements, so we're recommending adding a raised border. And then the pole structure, based on the site plan that was submitted, looks like it's in the right-of-way, so we would want to see that relocated onto the project site. So those would be the 3 modifications we would recommend. There's some other conditions of approval that were discussed in the staff report for bicycle parking, landscaping, screening and buffering, solid waste, and exterior lighting. So we can talk more about any of those if you have specific questions. We believe that with the incorporation of the recommended conditions of approval, the project's consistent with the development code. And I included the use permit findings. These are slightly paraphrased because it was really long. So we can refer back to this if you have questions about the findings that would need to be made for the use permit approval. There were draft findings included in the resolution that support approval of the project. In terms of the other agency approvals, the State Lands Commission approved the boat launch facility back in 1968, and as part of that gave the TDRPD the approval to construct the facility for public use. They've reviewed the proposed project and determined that they don't need a lease or lease amendment for the proposed activity that would occur. They don't believe that dropping boats off at a boat ramp is a commercial activity. TDRPD also reviewed the project. They operate and own the boat launch facility. They did not believe that meeting clients at the public boat launch would be a commercial activity because the rental activity is occurring on the project site, which would be private property. They didn't believe that the project was solely dependent on Donner Lake because boats could be taken to other water bodies. And after their board reviewed potential commercial uses a few months ago, their determination was that as long as a commercial use pays the launch fee, that's something that can take place at the public boat launch, and they didn't have any objections to what the applicant is proposing in terms of use. There was zoning administrator approval for boat ramp improvements in 1994. And the facility was determined to be consistent with the public zoning district. The town attorney reviewed the previous approvals and believed that they cover a wide range of services beyond simply public access and doesn't preclude other activities, including use of the ramp by commercial businesses, consistent with how other TDRPD facilities are used, like events happening at the West End Beach or at the regional park. And lastly, the Town of Truckee boat rental permit is required for any business that's running motorized watercraft at Donner Lake. In order to obtain that permit, the applicant has to meet a set of established criteria that the town council put in place in 1999. And that includes things like personal flotation devices, DMV licensing, town-approved safe operations and disabled vehicle recovery plans, $1 million liability insurance policy. And the applicant applied for the boat rental permit for the 2020-2021 season prior to the April 1 deadline, but in order to obtain that, they need to first have the land use approvals, which is why we're here tonight. So sort of the broader Donner Lake policies, this is something that came up in some public comment about authority over the lake and who sets the policies. And that's really something that the council is within their purview. So they determine what appropriate limitations on the number and type of motorized watercraft is, and the number of rental concessions that should be allowed, things along those lines. So we've acknowledge that those policies haven't been updated in quite some time. It was 1999 when that resolution was adopted, so things have obviously changed in 21 years. So we are planning to bring some proposed updates to the council before next summer to have them look at the current policies for motorized watercraft and determine if there need to be updates made to that. That would include the requirements for the boat rental permit. So that'll be the opportunity for the community to participate in that dialogue. about sort of the big picture questions about current and future uses at Donner Lake and what the community and the council feel are appropriate. Public comment for the project. As of about an hour before the start of this hearing, we had 30 comments. Those were either included in our staff report, or if they came in after the staff report was published, they were forwarded to the commission for review. So as of about 3 o'clock today, we had 12 letters supporting the project. That included support for additional rental options at Donner Lake, that's good for locals and visitors, that the current monopoly was unfair, appropriate development of the project site is proposed to the project, positive experiences with the applicant, and the fact that more rentals could reduce aquatic invasive species issues. 16 letters raised concerns with the projects. Those were primarily safety, traffic congestion, the fact that there's already a boat rental business at the lake, that the project site isn't directly on the lake. There were questions about aquatic invasive species, overuse of the lake, the potential increase of commercial uses, and the overall policies for Donner Lake. And then 2 of the comment letters just offered questions and suggestions for the project. In terms of environmental review, we are recommending that the commission find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to 3 different sections. 15301 is new construction or conversion of small structures. 15332 is the infill development exemption, and 15061B3 is the general rule exemption. So we can talk more about those if you have any questions. Our recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2020-13, determining the project exempt from CEQA per sections 15303, 15332, and 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines, and approving the use permit, zoning clearance, and sign plan based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. The commission could also continue the public hearing to a date and time certain if you think that additional information from the staff or applicant would be helpful. You could add, delete, or modify proposed conditions of approval. You could deny the project on the basis that the required findings cannot be made, or you could require additional environmental review. If you take action today, the appeal period would end at 5 p.m. on July 31st, 2020. And that's the end of my presentation. The applicant, Craig Schaefer, also has a presentation for you. He's participating remotely.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the applicant presentation. Mr. Schaefer is joining us online.
Yes, I'm here. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. And Laura, you have the presentation?
Yeah, let me just pull it up here.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. I just want to start by, first of all, saying thank you to the Planning Commission for hearing me this evening, and to the Planning Department and Laura and her team for taking the time they've taken to get this project up and running and to get it to this point. We're excited about it. We think it's a good opportunity here, and look forward to showing you what we've got. Laura, you can go on to my second slide. So you already know the project overview, basically. We're working at 15670 Donner Pass Road. We're proposing a small boat rental business specializing in newer pontoon and family boats. To do that, we'll repave the property at 15670 Donner Pass Road to be sure to provide adequate parking for boats, customers, and trailers. We'll bring that building up to ADA access and make an ADA bathroom for the customers to use. And while doing all that, we can bring the property up to current BMPs and all the current landscaping standards. Laura? So I guess start off, who am I? My name is Craig Schaefer. I've been a member of the Truckee community since 2001, and I've been a resident of Donner Lake since 2015. I volunteer throughout our community. I'm the president of the Truckee Elementary PTO. Been on that board for 5 years since my son started in TK. Gosh, I volunteer with the Humane Society of Truckee Tahoe since before that building even existed and we walked dogs out of the animal hospital. I donate to, I support countless community entities. I am definitely a part of the Truckee community. I love the Truckee community. I'm really excited for the opportunity to be a small business owner in the Truckee community. On my background, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Business from San Francisco State University and a Master's in Science and Environmental Systems from Humboldt State University. And along with others, I've got decades of customer service experience and I've been a successful entrepreneur. I have the skills that are necessary to make this a successful business, to keep this running. And Laura? So as you know, we're looking to do boat rentals, and we aim to offer high-quality boat renters to locals and visitors through the summer boating season. We want to see more than one option offered on Donner Lake. That's better for customers. It's better for business. When we have a little competition, it helps raise the level of service, of products, of quality. All of those things can come up with a little bit of competition. And we are a very small business, so we talk about a very little bit. The other thing is we want to ensure we can keep the supply can keep up with the demand. You know, we've got projects like the Elements going in with 300 units. If we have rental boats available, we're hoping that will, minimize how many people need to buy boats. If they want to use boats on the water, but there's just not the availability like we see a lot of now, they're going to go purchase them and use them once or twice and just not be familiar with how to launch them or the lake rules. You know, there's no requirement for knowing the lake rules when you launch your own boat, yet we all go over them very carefully. So we're just hoping that we can keep up with that so that we can have the supply available for people to use. Laura? So obviously with a new project, and we've heard it, congestion is something always talked about. So in two areas here we can talk about. First, on Donner Pass Road. To note, this project is a very low traffic business. We're talking about a few, at our maximum capacity, a few cars coming in the morning, a few moving around in the afternoon, and then a few leaving in the evening. And that's it. If we talk about other things that would go well on that site, maybe a sandwich shop or a coffee shop, you're talking about continual traffic in and out, constant people parking wherever they can. For our business, we've made sure we've got adequate parking, and we've even got room for more. It's a great lot. We've got room for more if it's going to be necessary. And again, same thing, we can keep the less experienced boat owners if they just want to grab a boat down in the valley and bring it up and rent it there because there's nothing available here. We can help keep them off Donner Pass Road, where they can, miss the boat ramp entrance and have to make weird turnarounds. And then I know this is outside of planning, but the boat launch congestion is something that concerns us as well. And again, more rental boats means less people bringing their boats out here and trying to launch, trying to figure out our sticker system, trying to figure out our payment system, whatever it may be. We are very efficient at getting in and out of that. Additionally, we can put boats on the water without putting trailers and trucks in driveways, in the parking lot, or like our neighbor said, across the street, double parked. We eliminate that in the boats we put in the water because we have adequate parking. We do faster boat launches. The last thing I want is to be in that boat launch any longer than we have to. We're very efficient at getting in and out, which in turn can add better access for everyone using the boat launch. Laura? And then safety. Safety is obviously a big concern for everybody. Now, we take the time to make sure we are properly educating all our rentals with detailed United States Coast Guard safety protocols. We read them, they read them, they have to initial on them, they have to sign off on them. Same thing with boat instruction, front to back. We want to make sure that customer is comfortable with the boat that they're taking out. And lake regulations. Again, somebody just dropping their boat in the water doesn't need to prove that they know any lake regulations. Whereas if they rent from us, not only do they get full instruction, they've got to sign off that they've got the instruction. I mean, when it comes to safety, we are beyond thorough. We want to make sure people out there are safe and comfortable because that makes their time more fun. And honestly, that's what we're trying to give them, is a good time out on a beautiful lake. And then it comes down to also the safety of rental boats. That's come up quite a bit. And although it sounds like a good thing to talk about, both the California Department of Waterways and the United States Coast Guard keep very detailed data on this and show no increase in accidents with rented boats. In fact, they show no difference in accidents in boats that are rented for marinas versus boats that are launched or boats that are even trailered somewhere. The data is just not there. So it sounds good in the emails we've seen and in the arguments we've seen, but it's simply just not supported by the data from the entities that keep that data. And Laura? And now I guess we get into what's really important to planning, the property itself, the site development. So as Laura mentioned, this is a commercial generally zoned property. I think what we're doing fits very well within the general plan of the town of Truckee. And this is, as planning has mentioned, this is proper usage with the use permit sign. We do have the Gregory Creek over on the west border of the property. And we've taken into effect, and we looked at the town's determinations and all the reporting that's been done, and we are not proposing any development within the setback whatsoever. Additionally, we had High Sierra Engineering address all BMPs on the property. When we're done with this one, this property is going to perform better than it ever has in the past. The planning department showed that we're CEQA exempt, and just to be sure, we went to Ellsmore Environmental and engaged them, who took a look at the hydrology reports, took a look at the plans, and also determined the CEQA exemption was proper. We went to LSD Transportation Consultants to do a parking survey, and we have adhered with every requirement they've requested. We feel we are right in line with what's necessary, but we do have more space if that's desired. Peak Landscaping did a wonderful landscape plan on the property. It's a gorgeous change. We're going to turn that dirt lot into a beautiful performing property. It's got screening for the neighbors, screening from the streets, and just is really going to turn out nice. And just to draw your attention to our last point here, we are asking for no exceptions. We're asking for no variances. We're asking for no code changes. We see what the town has set out in parameters. We've worked with planning, we've worked with engineering, we've worked with the building department, and we are completely in line with what everybody recommends for this site, and think that we have done a really good job with developing a very good project for the site at hand. Laura? And on public comments, there's been a lot of them. And I just want to start by saying, I'm a little disheartened at what we've seen in the negative public comments, especially what came in today. The majority, if not all the comments against the project have come from this group of affluent residents of Donner Lake. Many of them tell of their boats and their lakefront homes and their desires to keep others from getting on the lake. Boat rentals on Donner Lake is to allow all Truckee residents and visitors access to this beautiful resource. And it kind of pains me to hear the selfishness coming through on these comments. I'm a member of the Donner Lake community, and I want nothing more than to share this amazing lake with the rest of the Truckee community. There's so much of this, I was here first, or let's cut off now, I'm already here. I hope the commission can see this negative campaign by these few for what it is, as an attempt to keep others from enjoying this public resource so they can keep it to themselves as much as possible. But that said, we have looked at the comments and made sure, we want to be as engaged as we can as well. We altered our business plan so that our boats will be trailered by our company. A lot of the concerns were inexperienced people trailering their boats. So we've changed that. So boats will not be trailered off the property by customers, purely by floater with a motor. We want to be good neighbors, so we've ensured the proper landscaping plans are included, proper screening for adjacent properties. That also came up in comments. People have talked about how this is not being managed. There are 4 government agencies that have to be involved in permitting and licensing, and we have engaged all 4 of them, and each one has checks and balances in place to make sure that this project is a good project. As far as invasive species, we are very aware. We have been on Lake Tahoe and Donner Lake for many years. We're very aware of the invasive species, and in fact, we support, if it goes back to mandatory inspections for boats, we are much in support of that if the town of Truckee gets financially ready for that again. There's certain comments, like the ones from Mr. and Mrs. Nelson and a couple others, that I don't know how to respond to. They attack me personally. They attack my credibility. They say I make false claims. I can't respond to that because there's false assumptions. There's false data. If there are any of those that you would like me to expand on, or any issues that have come up in there that you're not sure of, please bring that forward, and I'd love to explain more. On top of it, I just want to say our thanks for the number of supportive comments on these projects. We constantly hear that vocal minority complaining that "not in my backyard" comes up so often, and that's what we're hearing here. But we saw a good number of people from all over the Truckee community supportive of the project. They like the fact that it's very low traffic and low congestion. They like the fact that it adds another option so that we can help, again, raise the bar of what's available to the community. They like the fact that that I'm a local business owner and running a small business. And I am very, very appreciative for those that have come through, and just want to be thankful for the community in general that has come out in support. And Laura? And I guess with that, I want to say thank you and open it up for any questions I can answer or extrapolations from the data or information that I can give you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Yeah, please stick around. I'm sure that we're going to have some questions for you. But before we do that, I would like to remind everybody, if you'd like to submit public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555 or email planningdepartment@townoftruckee.com now. And with that, we'll move into commission clarifying questions for staff. Susie, would you like to start with any questions you have for the staff about this application?
Sure. Get there. I didn't realize that I've met Craig before. So I have met Craig. He's the PTO at my daughter's school. I have worked with the PTO in funding a project for the kids to make reusable plates. I just felt the need to disclose that because I didn't realize until I saw his face that I have met him before. So is that all right? Are we cool?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm asking questions of staff right now. These are not going to be in any order, sorry. So as the restroom is shown on the plans, on that sketched plan, is that restroom ADA compliant as in big enough as shown on that plan, or does it need more work?
Craig could probably elaborate on his discussions with the acting chief building official on what improvements they need to make to that.
Okay, I can ask him when I get there. Then let me come over here. Okay, does this project in any way set a precedent for additional businesses? Does it pave the way or make the process easier for others to follow?
I'm not totally sure how to answer that. It is a conditionally allowed use, as I talked about in the presentation and in the staff report. So another business could propose something similar. It would be reviewed on the merits of that application. I think looks like Andy Morris might have something to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, as Laura said, every project has to be evaluated on its own merits. So whether this gets approved or denied, somebody else could come in and apply to do something similar as a land use. That project would be evaluated on its own. In terms of whether this makes it easier to allow other boats to be out on the water, that's different from the land use question. And as Laura said, we are looking at updating and overhauling comprehensively the town's boat permit requirements. So I think that it's important to keep in mind that what happens on the water is not really what's before the commission, but we are going to work on that because we know that the current structure is 21 years old and needs to be improved.
Okay, I think your answer was it's not going to make it any easier. They all have to be.
Yes, that would be a more concise and pithy answer.
Okay. I probably have more questions for you, Andy, if you want to stay close. This one's, well, I'll skip that and come back to you. So this is just a legal question. The California State Lands Commission has jurisdiction over submerged lands, beds of lakes. Is it their responsibility to do the inspection for the quagga mussel? I'm just
No.
Okay. Even though they are the management authority.
They do not manage the lake. They own the lake bed.
Huh.
See, California state law says that the land underlying any navigable body of water is owned in trust for the people of California by the State Lands Commission. But that doesn't mean that they regulate what happens in the water itself.
So only if quagga mussels land on the bottom?
I'm not telling you how the law should be. I'm telling you what the law is.
Okay. All right, I'm going to skip. I think I have another Andy question here. Okay, I don't get this at all. Our staff report said, the boat launch facility does not fall under the development code definition of a marina. This is talking about the boat launch. What difference does it make if it did fall under the definition of marina? Would that change this project?
I'll have to defer to Laura on that because I don't recall the significance of the definition.
So the discussion about the marina definition was included in the staff report just to clarify some previous comments that were raised from a member of the public about whether use of the public boat launch was a commercial activity that should be prohibited because the public boat launch is a marina which has to be operated by a government agency, essentially. But our interpretation of this is, and based on TDRPD's and the State Lands Commission's determinations, that the commercial activity is not occurring at the launch, that's not something that they need to regulate, that what is before the commission tonight is the approval for what's happening on the private property. So that was just included to try to clarify in case there were any questions about that issue that was raised.
I still have questions about that, but I can move on. So, okay, I'm going to go back up to the one that I skipped. We skipped one about frontage improvements are required for the project, including a minimum 6-foot wide sidewalk or a 10-foot wide paved path along DPR. So I didn't see it in the plans. Is there any way to route that around the mature trees that are existing in that area? Thank you, Andy.
I'll let Todd speak to that since he's the engineer that reviewed the project. And it wasn't included on the plans. It's a requirement that engineering is requiring them to comply with. So it would be on their improvement plans when those are submitted for the building permit.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we have not seen any proposed plans yet that would show where this 6-foot sidewalk would go or a 10-foot paved trail. I think there's probably room between the bike lane and the area in front there to maneuver a sidewalk to avoid trees. And we have some flexibility. Let's say they want to do a paved trail and they couldn't fit in a 10-foot wide. We have some flexibility there to maybe reduce the width of that. What we really like to do is have some separation between the Class 2 bike lane and the trail. And then there would be some flexibility as to the width of the path, and it doesn't have to be a straight line. It can have some meander to it if that meant avoiding an obstacle like a tree or something else. So, but when we see the improvement plans, that's something, if that's a concern, we can certainly take that into consideration when we review the improvement plans.
Okay, thank you. I just, it looked like there were some mature trees, a big aspen stand and a mature pine that would provide shade for that parking area that will then be paved. So it might be in our best interest to keep that for heat island mitigation.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I checked out the Google Earth photos, and there was a cluster of aspens and then a large pine. I think you're right. So if there's a way we can avoid knocking those down, that'd be ideal.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so sorry, I'm switching around here. Okay, so I don't rent boats. How many other boat rental companies are on Donner Lake, or is it one company? Yeah.
It's one company. They have the location close to the boat launch and then the location at the state park, but it's all operated by the same business.
Okay, and so the one close to the boat ramp is at the Donner Lake Village?
Yes.
Okay. And then in interest of disclosure, our community development director's family runs that, correct?
Correct.
And then, but she does not have any involvement in this process.
That's right. She's been conflicted out since the very beginning of our conversations with the applicant on this project. So that's why Jenna is here tonight running the show.
Great. Thank you, Jenna. Okay. Then, okay, so in our staff report, and I honestly, I didn't get a chance to go back and look at it, but the statement, the proposed operation does not constitute a commercial activity occurring at the boat launch. And who was the person, who made that statement? What entity?
That was the TDRPD and the State Lands Commission. They both have some regulations for what they consider a commercial activity happening at the boat launch. And under their requirements, having the applicant drop off boats for his customers to use didn't meet the criteria that would require regulation. under those definitions.
And to clarify, the State Lands Commission has a lease with TDRPD, which is how TDRPD is allowed to maintain the launch on what is State Lands Commission-owned land. And that lease, which is quite old, prohibits the rec district from allowing commercial activity at the launch. And so that was one of the first questions that we looked at, is wanting TDRPD and SLC to weigh in on whether this was commercial activity. State Lands Commission decided it's not. And then TDRPD decided on their own that it's also not. So we felt that we were not in a position to second guess either of them, since they're the ones with jurisdiction over those facilities.
Okay, so don't go anywhere, because it looked like the Nishimori letter said that they didn't actually declare it's not. They just sort of said they're not making a decision on it or something. Can you clarify that? Here, I can try and find it, but...
My recollection of what TDRPD said was that they concluded that it is not commercial activity, and they didn't think that any kind of supplementary approval or permit from them was required in order for this business to operate there. And I think State Lands, I think they did unequivocally say that this is not a commercial activity from their perspective.
Okay, thank you. All right, let me scroll back up to where I was. Thank you. That does actually clarify that for me. Sorry, scrolling. Okay, skip that one. Okay. Okay, and is there anything that would prevent this? This is just for Laura, Dave. Is there anything that would prevent this business from significant expansion? This was expressed in a lot of the public letters. Is this just up to the boat chief and the boat rental permit? And is there a time and place for public comment on that?
Yeah, so the limitation on this particular use would be what's in the use permit conditions of approval. And what's proposed is the 2 boats. If they wanted to expand that down the road, they would need to amend their project approval. There's going to be some site limitations based on the size of that parcel. If they added boats, they'd have to add parking, and there may not be space for that. So there could be some natural limitations on how big they could get. If it's a change that would require additional parking, that's probably something that would have to come back to the commission that wouldn't fall under the minor change that could be approved at the staff level.
And just to connect the dots a little bit, if Mr. Schaefer were to start operating a 3rd boat or a 4th boat, it would be a violation of his permit conditions, and we would tee up a revocation hearing so that he would no longer be able to operate at all.
Great. And then, so in some cases, it's a minor addition if you're adding less than 10% or something, but because it's only 2, if you added 1, it would not be a minor no matter what.
Correct.
Okay. Great. And then, so currently there is no sort of cap on the number of concessioners or number of boats. This is what you've talked about bringing to the town council before the next boating season.
Right. The only limitations that were in the 99 regulations were on the existing concessionaire at the time, which is now operated by Donner Lake Water Sports. So they have limitations on the number of vessels that they can rent, but they didn't restrict the amount of total number of concessionaires. So that's something that the council could look at when they look at updating their requirements.
So the 2 different locations, they have a cap on what they can do combined between those 2 locations?
Correct.
Okay. And is there a licensure requirement, like a California State Boaters Card, required for boat renters?
So my understanding of when the boater card requirement was put in place was that rental businesses lobbied to have rental boats excluded from that. So someone who owns a boat would be required to have it, but someone who rents a boat is not.
Okay. And then, so do you know anything about the plan for the recovery of disabled vessels, or is that something I should ask the applicant?
I think that would be a good question for the applicant.
Okay. Is it illegal to refuel all boats on Donner, all boats on all freshwater lakes, or just rental boats on Donner?
I'm not familiar with the refueling requirements, if that's something in the municipal code. Maybe Andy knows. But what the applicant's proposing is to do all of their refueling at a local gas station.
Okay, and so refueling on his property with a gas can would be a violation of his use permit. And, okay.
Correct.
Has there been any attempt by the town to get rid of two-stroke engines? This is probably, sorry for the council, but do you know? If not, we can move on.
I'm not sure. Looks like Andy might have some information on that, though.
Well, I'm not sure that's relevant to the question that's before the commission. The town's very old now boating ordinance for Donner Lake does have some restrictions that kick in if at some point the water quality of the drinking water becomes impaired at the lake. It says that if we receive notice from the state or from what says Donner Lake Water Company, but now it's the PUD, if we receive notice from one of them that the water quality has degraded, that certain restrictions kick in, one of which I think is the elimination of two-stroke engines. But again, it's very, very old, and we've never received any notice, and so it's just never taken effect. But there is no statewide ban on two-stroke engines. I had occasion to look at this last week. They've been banned on certain bodies of water, and I think that the sale of new two-stroke engines is pretty restricted, but old ones are specifically allowed to continue operating.
And Lake Tahoe does not allow them? Do you know?
That's correct.
Okay.
TRPA banned them, as far as I know.
Okay. And then do the other rental facilities use, do you know, does anybody know if they have two-stroke or four-stroke engines? Okay, moving on. Don't worry about it. So there is I again whizzed through this late at night, but is there a COA that addresses the BMP requirements for the additional paving?
I believe it was in the engineering conditions of approval, but maybe Todd remembers. Condition of approval related to BMPs?
For the storm runoff from the additional paving.
Yeah, so when the applicant submits their improvement plans, we would look at their BMPs and we would make sure that any runoff was treated per our standards.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's a standard thing that you guys, I didn't remember seeing it in the conditions of approval, and we do sometimes see it there, so I just wanted to.
Susie, it is condition 17.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Great. I am almost done. I think I'm almost done. No, I think I'm done. We already answered that one. I'm done. Yay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Susie. Commissioner Freeman, do you have clarifying questions for staff?
Susie, thank you. You hit pretty much all of them. I also had a question about the parking, and I guess I could kind of answer this myself, but if the applicant decides to put another use in the property like a coffee shop, there'll be a parking requirement that'll then, if they can make it work on the property, they can do it. If they can't, they can't.
Right, if a new use came in, we would either use the standard development code parking demand, or we would do something similar to the LSC study that would try to address what an appropriate amount of parking is for that particular use.
And was there anything about boat washing and cleaning? Is that considered maintenance that they're not going to do on the property?
I imagine that would fall under the boat maintenance, but the applicant could probably describe exactly what he envisions that including.
Okay, that's all I had.
All right, Commissioner Miller, clarifying questions for staff.
Thank you. I believe the Verklers in their comment mentioned that Tahoe is tightening rental access. Do you happen to know anything more about that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was in relation to. The only rental restriction on short-term rentals that I'm aware of is new accessory dwelling units. The state legislation now requires that those are restricted. So I don't know if they were thinking about potential short-term rental restrictions that the town could adopt in the future, or potentially COVID-related restrictions on rentals. I'm not really sure.
Okay, good to know. Also, could you speak to how the town could, should it decide to, could regulate boat access? Is it number of vehicles, size? How would that potentially play out?
Yeah, so as part of the update to the municipal code regulations, they could potentially put a limit on number of concessionaires. I'm not sure, it would probably be a question for Andy on whether they could restrict number of privately owned boats or types of boats. I'm not sure if that's something that's within their purview.
Yeah, there are a lot of possible ways to restrict, and we've started the research to look at kind of best practices from other lakes. One complication in this is that we don't own nor do we control any of the access points to the lake. The town doesn't. So the DLPOA launch is privately owned, the Tahoe-Donner launch is privately owned, the rec district has its own, and then there are a few private boat ramps scattered around the lake. So we may never have a completely clear picture of how many boats are out there at any time. I think that if DLPOA or Tahoe-Donner wanted to start rental operations, we could probably do something about that. But it might be hard for us to limit how many boats can roll down the rec district ramp in a given day, for example. So there are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of possibilities for how we could regulate things, but it's just way too soon for us to have any kind of idea what that could end up looking like.
Okay, thank you. That's it for my staff questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think most of my questions have been answered, but the one that sticks out here is, so right now the applicant's basically limited to their parking coverage, right, and having the two boats. If they were to find another place to park, say in unincorporated Nevada County, could they increase their inventory in that regard? I mean, is there any limitation to that?
So you're thinking if they acquired another parcel?
Yeah, I mean, just say for argument's sake, they found another place outside of the town limits where they could park, 20 more boats. Can they be ferrying those back and forth?
That's a good question.
I mean, I think it would involve a permit that incorporates Nevada County in addition to the town, and likely an amendment to our permit as well, to the use permit that you're contemplating tonight if it gets approved.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move into clarifying questions for the applicant. Susie, do you have questions for the applicant? I believe there was a couple that staff couldn't address.
There were. Where do we look? Where do we see Craig?
Mr. Schaefer still online?
I am. Can you guys see me?
Yes. Oh, yes. We can hear you. Okay,
Excellent.
You're completely behind me. I'm sorry I won't be able to look at you, but...
I'll turn around.
Okay, so you mentioned a little bit that you were definitely familiar with the quagga mussel inspections and the Tahoe inspections, and so what is your plan? Are you planning on getting like a Tahoe in and out sticker or any of those sort of things? Have you done the self-inspection before? Have you ever seen an infestation?
I guess the answer to all those questions except seen an infestation is yes. We have a Tahoe in and out sticker on the pontoon currently. We have been involved. This isn't a brand new boat for us, so we've been involved in the Donner Lake stickering last year as well, and are very familiar with how it works. The nice thing about a pontoon boat is there are no ballasts. There's no water intake into the boat, and so it's a pretty simple process with a pontoon boat, no doubt. And I have done the self-inspections. But right now our boat is just in Tahoe and Donner, so there's no other lakes to go into. But again, we make sure it's dry and clean before it enters any body of water. This is our lake too. I live across the street from the lake. It's really important for me to keep it as nice as possible as well. And I have not seen an infestation, luckily, because we keep things clean.
And are you familiar, does anybody know what the closest lakes that do have infestations are? That could be you or staff, either.
There is a list, I know. I do not know what's close. I know one time we went into a Scott's Flat Lake with a boat and came back and we made sure it was clean and dry and made sure it was not on the list. That would be Nevada City. That's as far as that boat's been.
Okay, thank you. How big is your gas tank? Like if you're doing 2 half-day rentals, you're going to have to pull it out, drive it down to the gas station and put it back in. Is that part of your plan?
The pontoon boat is 52 gallons. That boat can run pretty continuously during daylight hours for about 5 days. We would have no intention of pulling the boat and refueling it midday. That boat has been across Tahoe and back and used less than actually it was almost all the way across Tahoe and back and used 4 gallons of gas. We use a very high efficient boat with the highest ratings of efficiency from the state of California, stamped right on the engine. We're not running speed boats that need a lot of gas or that take a lot. We run this family pontoon that is very efficient.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I don't have a background in boating at all, so I appreciate you filling me in on that. Would you still have to pull it out to inspect for damage between renters?
The boat will come out of the water between renters every time. We don't want it sitting in the water. We don't want it sitting on the dock. So the boat comes out in between renters.
Okay, but you wouldn't have to bolt down to the end and fill up with gas, so that's good. Then scrolling. And so how, there was a possibility of a season pass for the boat ramp, but that it doesn't work out. What's going on with the pay for the boat ramp?
What came out of the TRPA meetings over the, fall or spring, was that they removed the season pass for commercial because they thought commercial users might use the ramp more than residential users, and they wanted to pay on an as-used basis. We fully supported that in all the meetings. We made sure that we were clear that the pay per use for commercial actually was a very fair and equitable way to be paying the boat ramp. There is a residential commercial pass that can be purchased for California residents. A residential season pass, pardon me, I apologize. Residential season pass, it can be purchased for California residents.
So if your customer comes back multiple times, they could purchase their own season pass?
No, it's per boat, not per person. So the boat will not have the boat, when used commercially, doesn't have a season pass on it. It is paid every time.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the willingness to support our public facilities with those fees. Okay, so we talked about the ability to expand. So you do not have any long-range business plans to expand this business for more boats, more jet skis, chartered boat trips, or sunset tours?
The only thing that we have thought about, and I approached Laura with this, is the jet ski becoming a pontoon versus a jet ski, and what that would entail. And so she told me about the process of coming back to planning with that, if that's something, because it would require more parking spots. So that's the plan we have there. There might be plans to do stuff in Lake Tahoe, but nothing in the works at this point, just ideas we might have. But no, we have no intention of running more than 2 vessels in Donner Lake at this time.
Okay, thank you. And how long does it take you to launch a boat? And have you ever been there when there's a line? How does the queuing work? And how does it work when you're coming out of the lake if there's a crowd?
Sure. No, that's a great question. The boat ramp, and I'm glad that the Parks and Rec, or the Recs and Park Division, is finally keeping good numbers, and they're trying to keep a good idea of what those lines and stuff look like. I live across the street from the boat ramp. The congestion that's constantly spoken about is a bit overblown, I guess is a good way to put it. Sure, on July 4th, it is a mess, no doubt there. But outside of a couple of holidays, it's not that big of an issue. I think the biggest user, what we watch going in and out, would be the Donner Lake Marina, and they're in and out quickly as well. It doesn't take, I haven't put a timer on it, but I can get a boat in the water if there's no line in 5 minutes, have the boat in the water, and I'd be pulling out with my trailer, be back at my boat in less than 5 minutes. So less than 10 minutes, and we are done and in the water. On a busy day, queuing works. You hope everybody's in a good mood. You queue up in line, and the next available, if there's a spot out of the two spaces, somebody will launch their boat. If a boat's coming in, the common courtesy thing is to wait for that boat to get pulled out by an empty trailer. Except again, for those couple of holiday days, it's fairly easy, and most people seem to be fairly kind in how they do it.
Wait, can you back up a second? You just said that the marina is the biggest user of the boat ramp, the existing marina?
Oh, actually, no. My wife just said commercial, but no, yes, the Donna Lake Marina pulls boats in and out of there on probably close to a daily basis. Rob Nishimori might be able to give you his exact numbers of how often he's in and out of that boat ramp.
Huh, that seems like news. Okay, well, thank you for your estimates on the time to launch. And what is your plan for recovery of disabled vehicles? Do you have to get another boat in line to get on the boat ramp?
Yes, we would put a boat. We do have a couple of people that are on the boat regularly that were on our disabled boat plan. So last year we applied for the permit to rent on Donner Lake through the Truckee PD, and were approved. It was only about halfway through the season that the planning department notified me that we thought we could do it out of the house without a permit, and learned that we couldn't. But so our disabled boat plan, our recovery plan, our fueling plan, all that had been approved already. As far as the safety goes, and our disabled boat plan included having other boats that we could rely on if necessary, and having the jet ski out as well if necessary.
Can the jet ski? The jet ski can't tow the pontoon boat. It would just be to take a person there and help fix the engine or something.
No, the jet ski could tow the pontoon boat back.
Oh. Well, that brings me to the question about are they both 4-stroke engines, or is the jet ski?
They run not only 4-stroke engines, but they have the highest ranking from the state of California in emissions.
Great, thank you. And so it sounds like you don't have to have the California State Boaters Card in order to rent a boat, but you mentioned your safety, safety talk. How long does it take you to run through your boat instructions and safety talk process?
That's quite a bit of time. Last year when we did some rentals, one of the things my customers mentioned to me was how much paperwork they have to sign and understand. Probably 10 minutes of time, and we do that out of the water. We go through all the regulations and all that outside of the water before we launch.
Is just one person who does the rental and signs the papers there allowed to drive it, or are other people on the boat allowed to drive it?
You have to be present, and you have to sign the documents to be able to drive the boat, and you have to be over the age of 25. My insurance company is very stringent on safety rules.
I'm sorry, you said 25 or 21?
Over the age of 25.
5. Okay, so if your customer wants to go to Tahoe, are you trailering it to Tahoe as well, or do you just sign them out and send them off?
We trailer it as well. We do not allow customers to tow the boats off the property.
Oh. Is there any lakes that you won't go to?
Oh, we won't go anywhere except for Donner Lake and Lake Tahoe.
Oh, all right. Okay. You mentioned some safety data. Can you tell me who the publishing study was for that safety data?
The United States Coast Guard and the California Department of Waterways.
Okay. They sound familiar. Okay. So is the restroom ADA compliant as it's drawn on those little plans, or does it still need more work?
So that partition that was put up very poorly between the restroom and what I think I labeled as the kitchen, I apologize, it's not in front of me. That partition goes away and the restroom becomes the size of that, what's labeled probably restroom and kitchen. The property doesn't need a kitchen, given it's an office. So we've opened that up and there is plenty of space, and we've been in contact with the building department to continue on that process of making sure that's ADA compliant. There's plenty of room.
Okay, good.
It's just to prefer 7'6" by 7'6" is the smallest requirement, and we exceed that without a doubt with that partition gone.
Great. And running through, we might be one more, let's see. Oh, how do you feel about the town's request in the condition of approval 29 that your sign has to have a raised border?
I think it looks cool. I've considered seeing if we could raise the logo also, but I'm not sure how that would look. I saw how Kenny went, or how the ice cream shops looked when he first did it, and he had to redo it. But no, I've got no problem with that condition at all. I think it'll add a nice little aesthetic.
Great. And I think I am done. Great. Thank you so much for answering all my questions.
I like the in-depth, Susie. I do appreciate that.
Commissioner Freeman, clarifying questions for the applicant.
Again, Susie, thank you for your thoroughness. I only have one left, which is how will you ensure that renters indeed park their vehicles in your lot and don't use the boat ramp parking or street parking or other parking locations?
I don't honestly know how to answer that question. I can't ensure anybody does anything for sure. I mean, we have parking available. We will direct them to our parking lot and nowhere else. Obviously, I can't, there's no law requiring them to, but we have the space available, and that's where they will be told to meet us.
Okay, that's it.
Commissioner Miller, do you have any clarifying questions for the applicant?
I do, thank you. Also, thank you, Susie, for knocking a lot of these out. I also am not a boat person, though could be, and I would love to hear more about the tutorial process. Could you go into more detail about what happens both on the water and on land?
Okay, so it starts on land. The first thing we do is go through the paperwork. I've worked with lawyers in town. I've worked with my insurance company to design what we feel are very maybe over the top explanations on safety and how to use the boat and regulations. So we start with the paperwork and we go through it. At the end of the paperwork comes the code, of what's safe, what's not, no drugs, no alcohol, those kind of basics. We then have 2 sheets of the Coast Guard safety, one for Coast Guard safety and one for pontoon safety. We read through each one of those and they sign off on those. Once that's done, we have a safety talk that we have that's clearly written out that we present to the police department for our approval, where we go through all the safety things on the boat. Not just how to start the boat, stop the boat, and run the boat, but where's the fire extinguisher, where's the first aid kit, where are the extra flotation devices, have we fitted everybody with a flotation device? All that is on a checklist that I personally sign at the end to say we went through this and I'm comfortable with them being on my boat. Yeah, I think that covers it's a little bit arduous, but like I said, one customer mentioned that it's long, and a bunch of customers mentioned that they felt very safe and comfortable and very thorough in what we've done in the pre-inspection. Once they are on the lake, it's make sure they know how to turn it on, because at that point, it's just like driving a car.
Do you, at any point on land back at the business office, hop on the boat and show them where the buttons are, or does that happen once they're in the water?
This is all done on the boat. This is 100% done. The boat's very comfortable and nice. It's a great place to sit. There's a table to sign documents. But so everything is pretty much done while we're sitting on the boat in the parking lot.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schaefer, the only question I have is about staff. You're saying this is an owner-operator business, so you and/or family members are going to be doing all of the work. Is that correct?
Personally, I do all the work. Yes.
Okay. All right. So, thank you, Mr. Schaefer. We appreciate that. At this point, Carissa, do we have any public comment that has come in since the meeting has started? And would you like to read that for us, please?
Yes, I will review that there was extensive public comment before this meeting started that was made available to all of the planning commissioners to review. Since the meeting has started, we have also received extensive public comment. I will start with the emails. To whom it may concern, my family and I strongly support a boat rental business at 15670 Donner Pass Road. It would be an excellent use of the property in that growing area. It would also be nice to have options for boat rentals on Donner Lake. The current monopoly on the lake does not fare well for customers. Best, Marty. Another email, Planning Commission, I encourage you to delay your vote on the floater with the motor boat rental proposal until you fully assess and update the Truckee ordinances and guidelines around this issue. I think the Truckee ordinances can be updated in a short period of time. We care about the safety of all boaters and boat renters on Donner Lake. The California Boater Card Program requires boat operators to take a state-approved boating safety course, either online or in a classroom, and pass a test in order to secure a lifetime license. The program is being phased in by age groups. As of January 1, 2018, people 20 years or older or younger must possess a card. The phase-in schedule continues in 5-year increments until 2025, and boaters must have a card regardless of age. Let's get the Truckee ordinances up to date prior to passing this boat rental proposal. We care about the safety on Donner Lake. I recently rescued 2 paddleboarders who could not get back to shore due to wind. Let's make sure we are not doing many boat rescues with a quickly passed proposal regarding rental boats on Donner Lake. This proposal can and will bring up the boating traffic and safety issues on Donner Lake. Good safety ordinances are key in this decision for boating on Donner Lake. I agree with Jay and Tamiko Verkler, letters in its entirety. Best, Christy Corley. Another email. I believe that a boat rental business on the West End will be a great addition to the community, and Craig will be a thoughtful business owner who gives back. He has already done so much for our town through his commitment and leadership of the Truckee Elementary PTO. Best, Dana Peterson, Tahoe Donner resident. Another email. I am emailing to support floater with a motor, from Nathan Holden. Another email, to whom it may concern the Town of Truckee Planning Commission. I am the owner of 15434 Reed Avenue West. My husband and I support Craig Schaefer's application for use approvals. We believe this will not cause added congestion since Craig will offer parking on his property. We further believe that Donner Lake needs more boat rental capacity. Several times during the past 15 years, we've been unable to rent from the existing vendor because of lack of capacity. In addition, we believe competition is always good for customers of this sort of offering. Please feel free to contact me with questions. Maureen Carey Bolin and John Richard Bolin, and they list their phone numbers. Those are all of the emails we received. I now will read text messages. We have received quite a few, so just one moment, please. Agenda item 8.1, floater with a motor. The landscape and screening plan included with the staff recommendation address my concern with the project. I support approval of the project as long as the submitted landscape and screening is included. Jeff Jacobson, owner 10060 Donner Lake Road. Next text message. To whom it may concern, my family and I strongly support a boat rental business at 15670 Donner Pass Road. It would be an excellent use of the property in that growing area. It would also be nice to have options for boat rentals on Donner Lake. The current monopoly on the lake does not fare well for customers. Best, Marty. Next text message. I support agenda item 2, floater with a motor, and have options on the lake for boat rentals. It is long overdue, and access to a new site would be much easier and less traffic than the current business. Next text message. Craig is a great community member, and floater with a motor will provide a much needed competitive boat rental service on Donner Lake. Next text message. I strongly support Craig and his boat rental business. I think it would be a positive to offer more options like floater with a motor, as well as encourage local owned and operated businesses. Craig is a stand-up guy who has shown his strengths in responsible, organized, and professional business skills. I hope this gets approved, as we could all use some extra happy these days. Next text message. This text is in support of Craig Schaefer's I think he means floater with a motor application. Not only is Craig Schaefer an upstanding community member who supports our community every day through his commitment and leadership to the Truckee Elementary Parent-Teacher Association, but he is just a wonderful person. A boat rental business at the end of West End would be welcomed and I'm sure would be good for business. I also think he would run his business smartly and in line with all regulations and would use all property well and for the use of all. Currently, there just aren't enough places to rent a motorboat, which doesn't work very well for people like me who are local and don't own a boat. Craig also lives nearby on Donner Pass Road, so has a personal interest in smart property use and keeping congestion down. Next text message. I am the owner of 15434 Reed Avenue. My husband and I support Craig Schaefer's application for use approvals. We believe this will not cause added congestion since this project will have parking. And we believe we need more competition and capacity for rentals on Donner Lake. Often we cannot rent when we want to from the existing vendor. We think more capacity will help. Thank you, Maureen and John Bolin. Next text message. I think updates in town ordinances need to be made for this summer regarding boating safety rather than wait until next summer. Thank you, Christy Corley. And then she adds, if passed, 8 parking places seems like a lot of cement for the site. Can it be less? Next text message. Public comment, boat rental proposal. How does this business get boats from office across street to the water every time? And how many times per day is predicted? Is alcohol allowed on boat? How is boat driver trained? How will this project interfere with fishing? Matt Miller, Truckee. Then he adds, how do they propose to get rid of trash from boats? And last text message at this point. Will the review that Andy mentions potentially prohibit or place additional restrictions on the floater with the motor proposal? All 4-stroke PWCs at Donner Lake Water Sports, I believe. Direct injection 2-strokes are allowed on Tahoe, by the way. Question for Craig as a follow-on to the commissioners. You addressed boat fuel refill, but not wave runner refill. The wave runner will need intraday fueling. What's the plan? Another question for Craig from the same person. A key safety and inconvenience issue is a novice driver docking the boat at the boat ramp, especially in afternoon winds. You may be able to dock quickly, but can a novice driver? Those are all of the text messages. I now will play a handful of voicemails we've received. Apologize, give me one moment to queue up the first one.
Hi, Rob Nishimori, Donner Lake Marina and Water Sports, commenting on item 8.1. This is a critical moment for the town's vision of how Donner Lake will be used by the public. This is about the precedent this decision set in allowing transient rental companies free access to do business on the Donner Lake public boat ramp. You can't deny that Donner Lake is in the vicinity of this project or that this business will primarily operate from the Donner Lake public boat ramp. There is reason that rental businesses with motors are discretionary, and the context of this business location and how it operates are totally within the Planning Commission's purview to discuss. I am concerned about the long-term precedent this decision sets for the rest of the drop-and-go boat rental companies that will be coming to set up shop at the public boat ramp if this project is approved. Multiple agencies on Tahoe are pushing these transient rental companies out of Tahoe and will drive them to our overused and undermanaged lake. Historically, the only real cap on numbers of commercial rent operators has been the requirement to have one of the 8 commercial parcels adjacent to the water in order to get a concession permit from the town. If the Commission removes this requirement for the operator to be on the water, they will effectively open the floodgates to any and all businesses to use the TDRPD boat ramp and public docks to the detriment of the public. How will you tell businesses number 2 through 10 that while the boat ramp is available to business number 1, it is not available to the rest? Who will monitor this? TDRPD has stated that they have no interest in running a concession on their boat ramp property. Municipal Code 12.02.040 requires town council to create standards, including a limit upon the number of rental concessions in order to provide guidance to the chief of police in issuing concession permits on Donner Lake. This action was never completed by council. Recommended condition of approval number 23 requires that the applicant obtain an annual boat rental concession permit from the chief of police or his designee who has no basis of knowledge to know how many concessions or rental boats should be allowed on Donner Lake. A use permit approval based on a rental permit ordinance that isn't fully completed doesn't make sense. Council should take action on these standards. How can the Planning Commission take action on a use permit based on an ordinance that was never completed by council? If the council says no more concessionaires allowed, it would invalidate the Planning Commission's decision on this land use approval. It's a chicken and egg problem. Condition 1B within the town's boat rental concession permit requires that the concessionaire provide written authorization from the place where the boats will be launched. TDRPD board has not issued authorization to anyone. They have stated that the launch fee is only permission to launch, not to operate from their property. Town staff is saying that the absence of a decision on this issue from TDRPD is equal to the authorization to allow everyone to operate. That is wrong. Other points I think you should consider. Eyes on the water equals safer renter behavior. Number 2, this is the wrong location for this business model as it concentrates rental boats on Donner Lake versus dispersing to all lakes in the area. Number 3, my company has an immediate rapid recovery response time versus no boat in the water to effect a rescue. Relying on the police boat for a response is unrealistic. Thank you for your time.
Next voicemail.
This is Jay Vergler, 14530 South Shore Drive, commenting on the floater with a motor proposal. I wrote a more comprehensive letter on the matter, but here are 4 high points I want you to consider. Number one, the staff report says that considerations for lake safety and enjoyment have not been addressed and were considered out of scope for their report. Before approving, I think it's pretty important that the lake safety issues are considered, and I'll talk about a couple of them. Number two, I've heard that this is just renting a boat like one might rent in Reno. This is very different. Someone renting in Reno will usually have some expertise and commitment and occasionally make their way to Donner. This proposal is about having a Donner Lake-oriented business trying to rent every day, but without the employee presence necessary on the lake to effectively run an operation. Number three, using the public ramp as the only operational point of presence on the lake is a really bad idea. I want you to imagine a novice driver coming back in afternoon winds, being blown around with this two-story pontoon boat trying to dock in the midst of other boating users also trying to use the ramp. It's going to be a mess. I regularly watch the current marina put an employee in a raft or a skiff, drive out to the large boat, and then pilot that boat into the marina. And they do this to their marina, not while the rest of the public is trying to use their marina, and they do it with an employee. I don't see how this is going to work on the public ramp with this novice driver docking the boat. And how many of these rental guys are we going to allow to operate from the public ramp? And which agency is going to make that decision, and based on what policy framework? Number four, the recommendation for approval has really not been thought through, especially with regards to the impact on the lake, and the staff report says exactly that. In my letter, I proposed some specific measures and restrictions that could allow rental operations without as much safety impact on the lake. Andy Morris, the town attorney, agrees that a town review of current operations and regulations, along with some new ideas with the various stakeholders of the lake, is really needed. Please defer consideration of this matter and let the town do their work first. It'll probably take a few months, but then the floater with a motor can operate with a proposal that is in an up-to-date regulatory structure dealing with some of these lake safety issues. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Next voicemail.
Hi, this is Jim Tweetmeyer. The agenda item is 202000011/UPZCSP, I think. It's the floater with a motor permit. My bigger concern about this is the logistics in terms of managing the departures and arrivals at the marina, unless someone is permanently stationed there to do that. I think it could be a problem because many people that rent watercraft don't really have a clear understanding of the operation of the watercraft, especially with something as big as a pontoon boat. So thank you for your consideration on this, and have a fun meeting. Bye.
Next voicemail.
Hello, this is Christy Corley, and I'm calling regarding the floater with a motor boat rental proposal. I live at 14848 South Shore Drive in Truckee. I encourage you to delay your vote on the floater with a motor boat rental proposal until you fully assess and update the Truckee ordinances and guidelines around this issue. I think Truckee ordinances can be updated in a short period of time. We care about the safety of all boaters and all boat renters on Donner Lake. The California Boater Card Program requires boat operators to take a state-approved boating safety course, either online or in a classroom, and pass the test in order to secure a lifetime license. The program is being phased in by age groups, and as of January 1st, 2018, people 20 years old and younger must possess this card. The phase-in schedule continues in 5-year increments until 2025, when the boaters must have a card regardless of age. Let's get the Truckee ordinances up to date prior to passing this boat rental proposal. We care about the safety on Donner Lake. I recently rescued 2 paddleboarders who could not get back to shore due to wind. Let's make sure we are not doing many boat rescues with a quickly passed proposal regarding rental boats on Donner Lake. This can and will bring up the traffic and the safety issues on Donner Lake. Good safety ordinances are key in this decision for boating on Donner Lake. I agree with Jay Verkler's letter in its entirety as well. Thank you, Christy.
There are two more voicemails that for some reason are not letting me play them. However, I can read the transcription, and I'll apologize. This is a rough transcription. The first one says, hello, my name is Joseph Nick Thorne. I'm a resident of Truckee for the last 20 years. Agenda item, floater with a motor. Support, I apologize, this is a hard transcription. Support of totally local residents, starting up companies, small companies, and along with some competition on the lake. I believe there's pretty much been a monopoly on the lake since I can remember. I would like to see some options, and it doesn't look to me that this would impact traffic in any sort of way. Please support the floater with a motor, and I believe it's agenda item number 3. Thank you. And next voicemail, again, this doesn't have the option to play, so I'm going to try to read this rough transcription. I'm Sarah Walker, 16-year resident of Truckee. I'm calling regarding, sorry, this project is very close to our residents. We want to make sure that the combination of these 2 permits does not allow, oh, this is for our next item. I apologize. This is for our next agenda item. While I was here, I got a few more emails and text messages. They were just thank you for reading what I read. And I have a handful of more emails. Nancy and Dick Nelson says, we do not appreciate Mr. Schaefer using the Nelson name in a negative way. We also do not appreciate his tone as selfish lakefront owners. We do commend Mr. Schaefer in realizing how foolish it would be to have renters trailer and launch the boat. That happened to be one of our comments. Why is he having an employee park when he is the only employee and is in walking distance from the proposed business? Please ask Mr. Schaefer to commit to only having 2 rental watercraft, the Nelsons. An email from Carolina De La Torre. Please consider floater with a motor. They would be another great choice to provide the thriving community of Truckee Tahoe. They have an activity that would be appealing to all age groups from 8 to 80. No special skill set needed. Lastly, great activity for social distancing. Thank you from a resident of Truckee who has many different generations trying to do an activity together. This would be it. Nancy and Dick Nelson emailed again and says now he says he will only go to Tahoe and Donner. What happened to Boca and Stampede? This guy is dancing. And the last email from Nancy and Dick Nelson says, how is he going to manage alcohol on his boat? That is all the public comment I have.
Okay, with that, we'll close public comment, and now we'll give Mr. Schaefer a chance to respond to the public comment. You still with us, Mr. Schaefer?
Thank you. And so that was definitely full of both ways, and I do appreciate everybody's input. Again, to draw attention, the negatives we're hearing, I didn't hear one from outside of the Donner Lake community. And again, we are trying to provide a service for all of the Truckee community. So it appears a small group, again, has the negatives. Some of the things that came up, how will I manage trash on the boat? We have to have sanitation, TTST, I believe it is. I apologize if that's the sewage, on the property. So we will have trash service. It is required, and we already have a will serve letter for that. How will it impact fishing? I'm not sure exactly how to address how it impact fishing. The fishermen know who I am, actually, and we've been in contact. Fishing mostly takes place early in the morning. Somebody asked what times would be out and how often. Boat rentals are typically half day, so at 10 o'clock or so, and then at 2 o'clock or so off the lake, 6 o'clock, and it depends on the time of year as well. Novice docking, that's a great question and something that I want to address directly. I I could personally stand out on the edge of the dock when a boat is coming back in. I let them know to let me know before they're going to come back in at any time, and I am in contact with them through at all times if necessary. And I have also let them know that if they are in any way not comfortable bringing the boat to the dock, that I will simply swim out to it. It's an easy process. I'm in that lake all the time. I do not want anybody who's not comfortable pulling the boat onto a dock, pulling the boat on the dock. That nobody wins in that situation. Fueling the jet ski came up. If the jet ski does rent, which we have the jet ski on the rental plan because we own it. It's not currently been on the rental plan. But there has a 26-gallon tank in that thing and can easily run a couple of days. It's a very small, it's only a 135, so it's a very small jet ski motor that's very, again, we are top of the line in fuel efficiency. And then obviously alcohol is a very important discussion. The town of Truckee does not allow alcohol on any boat, any rented boat in Donner Lake. So we make sure customers know that. We talk to them about that. If we feel there could be any kind of issue, we'll poke into coolers without any questions. One thing that came up is limits on number of boats, and I think that was misrepresented. The police, the concessionaire's permit supposedly only allows 12 boats for owner. Mr. Nishimori, who brought in his, has approximately 20 boats, vessels. I haven't counted, but from what it shows on his website, there are approximately 20 vessels or more that he currently rents. So I'm not sure how the number of boats is being managed, or whether they're just being overlooked or not being regulated. They put 12 boats in there because it allows for others, not having a single company out there, which unfortunately is not what's happening. But I just think that there haven't been any other options, and here we are opening that again to get rid of this kind of monopoly that just doesn't bode well for the community in general. An employee present was one more, and that is what I say before anybody docks. They're told to make sure they notify me, and I stand out on the end of the dock and am present for them if they need me. If there was anything else that came up, I know there was a lot. If there's anything else that came up, please, that you want me to extrapolate on, I would be happy to.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Okay, commissioners, shall we start with some deliberation?
Can I ask one or two quick questions raised by that?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Super. The Christy Corley said that she thought that the parking spaces seemed like a lot. What, are you still there, Craig? What was your experience with parking? I know that you operated a little bit last year. Did you, how many parking spaces did you end up using last year?
At the time the boat would go out, 2 to 3 parking spots were being used. I don't recall ever seeing 4, 2 to 3, and that's actually what LSC Environmental found was 2.5. So I'd have to concur that 2 to 3 when the pontoon boat goes out. Employee parking. Talked about the employee parking. We do need an employee vehicle. I need a truck to be able to move the boats in and out. So it's not so I can drive to work. That truck will sit there because I can walk there. It's so that we can move the boats around.
Got it. That actually makes sense as well. And they were talking about eyes on the water. So while they're out boating, are you watching?
No, I am not watching. I mean, I do like to stand out there and watch, but that's purely just because I like to and not because of any regulation. This is very common in pretty much any rental lake that you'll find. Lake Tahoe, there's no eyes on the boat. You go down to Scotts Flat Lake, there's no eyes on the boat. And if you say there's eyes on the boat and you're standing over on, let's say, Donner Lake Marina or over on the state park, you can't see the boat across the water. So eyes on the boat it's not a possibility, and in no other situation I know about is it a requirement.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Does anybody want to start? Want to share your thoughts, Susie? You want to go last? What do you want?
Either way.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Miller, put you on the spot on your first meeting.
Sure, let's do it. A couple arguments spoke to me very clearly. One is that as a person who does not own lakefront property, I would like to be able to take a boat out sometime, and making sure that this beautiful public resource is accessible to all, and in the spirit of competition, that argument appeals to me. Also, recently, California implemented SB 743, I want to say, that replaces level of service as a measure of traffic with vehicle miles traveled. So I appreciate the comment about how congestion perhaps isn't a large issue, but I also want to move us away from looking at congestion as a measure of traffic and more to the fact that this would reduce the need to drive very far to get a boat. And once someone is in Truckee and wants to get in a boat, now they have a local option that doesn't require driving 40 miles round trip. So both of those arguments appeal to me, and I personally see no grounds on which to reject this given the current regulations and rules that we're operating under.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Freeman.
This is a hot topic for the community, a lot of comments. I think it boils down in my mind to the fact that he's really renting one boat. It's just not that large of a use. And I look at kind of an old, dilapidated property that's a high-profile corner piece on a street, and it's going to be completely redone with landscaping. And so I think it's a good project.
Commissioner Tarnay.
I haven't decided either way. Part of me does agree with Christy Corley that the parking spaces seem excessive. It seems like taking a small thing and making it into a very big parking lot with all of the runoff issues and heat issues that come from paving. It just seems like a lot to me. There's a thing called induced demand, where if you provide extra parking, then people will drive extra cars. And so for me, that is it's just a monetary investment in an infrastructure that we are trying to move away from. So I would love to get your guys' input if you would consider, he said that he only needed 2 to 3 parking spots, never 4. We're requiring 8. Of course, 2 of those are for the boats and 1 is for, I guess it's 5, as opposed to he's never gotten to 4. I do agree. Well, one thing that I do see in challenging in approving it is that if you can bring up that slide, Laura, about the findings, and one of the findings definitely talks about finding that it is safe for the community. Number 3, proposed developments would not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, injurious to the property or improvements in the vicinity. I don't know if that addresses, I agree the police chief actually had some concerns about safety. And just as a person who has tried to swim long distances in the lake, it can be scary, and the bigger the boat, the scarier it is. So in that way, I feel like it's a little bit scary. It's rental users without a lot of knowledge of the equipment, and teeny tiny little people just actually swimming with hopefully a neon swim cap on. One more thing I wanted to try and discuss is that I love that they were trying to preserve some mature trees in the middle of this parking lot. I just wanted to make sure that that was done with the best chance of survival for those trees. I am not an arborist, but I know that there are resources and the proper way to bed around those to allow them to grow without creating root intrusion in the pavement, and but while allowing them to grow. So I don't know if there's any way that we could just, I don't know, have somebody check into that and make sure, I guess the landscape designer, just make sure that those trees that we're preserving in the middle have the best chance of survival. So those are my 3 things. I think parking's a little excessive. I think there is still some safety concern that could be a challenge under finding 3, and I would love to make sure those trees, the mature trees, are kept both on the edge and the middle of the parking lot.
Does anybody have any concerns about the congestion traffic down there at that intersection?
Well, and that's The extra parking that creates that induced demand. Yes, if you go down there in the summer, that is incredibly congested. I'm not worried about the congestion. I'm worried about enticing more people to drive there. But it is a very congested place. It's not what we're measuring this on. It is, I did look at it on the map, it is less than 200 feet from a bus stop. I would love it if we could get people to take the bus to get on a boat.
So taking everyone's temperature, it sounds like we have potentially 2 for, right? And 1 perhaps undecided?
Can we talk in more detail about the parking? Just doing the quick math, if we removed 1 of the parking spaces for customers, it would drive the expected average vehicle occupancy, assuming maximum conditions, from 2.5 to 3.25, which it's a small number, so it's like any change is going to be quite large. If the applicant is interested in having less parking, is amenable to that, I would be interested in supporting a change.
And honestly, losing 1 parking spot might not make very much difference in the square footage that's paved, and I understand that. It's just a question to discuss.
Well, I think we also have to take into consideration just the navigability of a parking lot and with a boat and a trailer. I mean, there's a certain amount of turnaround room that you're going to need to have. And really 1 parking spot per boat, you still need that other additional parking spot for a trailer, or excuse me, for the tow vehicle. So I'm not sure if I share your concerns that there's too much parking. I do share your concerns about the trees, though. I think that it would be nice to maintain those mature trees as much as possible. I don't know if there's a way that we can add any language for that, or, I mean, I get any feedback from the staff on that?
I suppose we'll see if Todd nods in agreement, but with the engineering condition that talks about the frontage improvements, potentially we could add some language that talks about designing around the mature trees. Todd is nodding.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would anybody care to make a motion?
Oh, does anybody want to, anybody have any concerns about safety of the operator? I guess a 10-minute tutorial is significant when you're waiting to get on the water, but a 10-minute tutorial in the face of what it takes to actually get a boat operator's license is less than significant. I'm just wanted to see if anybody had any other safety concerns of that.
I guess my thought is you can already rent a boat on Donner Lake. And so if you want to rent a boat, that option is available regardless. And so I don't think this applicant needs to define the safety standards. There's statewide standards. He's meeting those standards. And I think they're probably ample.
Is this boat that much larger than what's available?
I looked on the Donner Marina website, and like he's mentioned, they have 14 boats listed on there. One is a 28-foot pontoon boat. I don't know what size the applicant's boat is.
So they have something similar already at the other rental.
Yeah, I don't think that there's. I don't think that this is a bigger vessel than what is already out on the lake on a regular basis. I will say that I feel like Donner Lake is a heavily overused resource, and I have concerns about. How many boats we have out on the water and the safety and stuff like that. But again, yeah, there's already boat rentals allowed. But I do think that as a community, there needs to be a larger discussion as to how much we use this resource, but I don't feel that adding a small family-owned boat rental company with 2 vessels is going to make a huge difference.
Great. I actually really appreciate that. And thanks, Daniel, for filling me in on what's available at the other rental.
Yeah, just as a note, I found it. So the boat he is offering seats 10 people. Doesn't say the size. The largest boat at the Donner Lake Marina seats 20 people.
Oh, I have to say, when I looked online, I was looking actually at the map to see where this was. It pops up on my map as an existing business on that website, it actually says it seats up to 14, but 10 comfortably. But we're requiring just 10? Does it make a difference?
I don't think it's us making the decision as to how many people the vessel can, the Coast Guard is the one that tells us how many people the vessel can have.
Okay, well, I think the Coast Guard allows that one to have up to 14, is what it looked like on the floater with a motor website. But, all right, thank you so much for the discussion. I really appreciate that.
I'll make a motion to, you pull the language up, please. Adopt Resolution 2020-13 determining the project to be exempt from CEQA per Section 15303, 15332, and 15061 of the CEQA guidelines, and approving the use permit, zoning clearance, and sign plan based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
And that included adding the language about retaining the mature trees with the frontage improvements.
Yes.
Did you want to make any modifications to the parking?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But yes, add language about the mature trees.
Seconded.
Krista, can I have a roll call, please?
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, how's everybody feel about a 10-minute recess before the next item? Okay, it is,
Before we move on, I just wanted
Yes.
to remind everyone
Oh,
of the
thank
appeal
you.
period, 5 p.m. on July 31st, 2020.
okay, Laura, thank you very much. I have 6:07. We will reconvene at 6:17. Planning Commission meeting back to order, and we'll move on to agenda item 8.2. Excuse me, agenda item 8.3 is a consideration of a project amendment for the Elements Mountain Company, application number 2020-17. And Laura, it's back to you again.
Thank you. This project is a request for a project amendment to combine two use permits that were approved for Waltman Construction and Snowtech, two businesses that operate out of Tahoe Donner.
I'm sorry, Laura, I got a little ahead of myself, it looks like. A couple things on my little list here that we need to talk about. If you'd like to submit a public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555 or email planning department at Town of Truckee. Do we have any recusals or disclosures? Okay, pardon me, Laura, back to you.
Okay, so as I was saying, Waltman Construction and Snowtech are two businesses in Tahoe Donner. They merged into the Elements Mountain Company in 2017. The current owner is interested in combining those previous use permit approvals, which approved snow removal services at 17356 Northwoods and a snow removal and driveway sealing business at 10414 Panamint Place. So the proposed project amendment would address the combined business operations, and they're also requesting amendments to the previous approvals to allow an expansion of the uses and services and equipment at the Panamint Place location. None of the expansion would be at the Northwoods location. Major discussion topics for the Commission to consider is whether the use permit amendment adequately addresses the combined business operations and ensures compliance with current town standards, whether the size and operating characteristics of the proposed uses are appropriate for the project sites, including the increase in equipment and services at Panamint Place, and have all potential compatibility issues been addressed. So in addition to those, the Commission, or in addition to those being major discussion topics, those are areas where the Commission has discretion in its decision-making. So you could choose to discuss any of those questions or modify, add, or delete recommended conditions of approval if you see the need to do that to make the required findings. So these are the locations of the two project sites. The Snowtech approval, there was a use permit approval, I think the state might be wrong, apologize for that, for the snow removal business at Northwoods Boulevard. That included a about 9,500 square foot commercial building, 8,000 square feet-ish of equipment storage, and 1,400 about ancillary office space, as well as 24 pieces of snow removal equipment. The project amendment was approved by the Planning Commission in November 2009, which increased the amount of snow removal equipment to 28 pieces and allowed installation of a 1,000-gallon above-ground fuel tank. So as you'll see from the aerial view of the property there, that building and parking and everything has been constructed. Waltman Construction has been in operation since our records showed back to the 80s. It sounds like the applicant has records showing that it goes back to the 70s of operating out of the Panamint Place location. There was the approval in 1996 by the town zoning administrator, which approved the snow removal business at that location. And that included existing structures and equipment on the property. Those were down here in the southern part where you can see on the aerial. Included a residence, a tractor barn for equipment maintenance and storage, a 10,000-gallon above-ground fuel storage tank, 5,000-gallon water storage tank, a railroad box car that was used for storage, and 13 loaders, 2 blowers, and 1 plow truck. And there was 1 full-time year-round mechanic and 12 part-time winter seasonal employees at that time. And then subsequently, the Town Council in 2010 approved a use permit, a vesting tentative map, a zoning map amendment, and a development code amendment, which expanded the snow removal business, and it also established a driveway sealing business. There were 40 pieces of equipment at that time, including 36 blowers and 4 loaders, and they also approved an about 18,000 square foot building for equipment maintenance and storage with 2 residential units. That approval included a subdivision of the property to 2 parcels, a rezone of the property to rural residential, and allowance of a seasonal contractor's yard ancillary to a snow removal business as a conditionally allowed use in the rural residential zoning district. The time extensions were approved by the Planning Commission in 2016 and 2018 for the project. The one in 2018 was only related to the tentative map. And the applicant is currently in the building permit plan check process for the maintenance storage building. Here's the map. You can see the highlighted area here is the new parking with the building here. The existing residents and structures are down here at the other end. And the blue lines show the sort of approximate areas where the property would be divided into the 2 parcels. Here are the building renderings that were approved at that time. And after the Waltman Construction and Stowtech merged in 2017, becoming Elements, we at that time determined it was appropriate to continue monitoring the 2 different use permits, which had different conditions of approval, obviously, for each location. And then if the operations were to change and a modification of the conditions was required, then a project amendment would need to come to the Planning Commission. So that's what the applicants currently submitted. They've requested approval of the use permit to address the combined business operations and request the expansion of operations. In terms of the land use approvals, the project sites are zoned neighborhood commercial for the site on Northwoods and rural residential, 1 dwelling unit per 1.5 acres for the Panamint Place location. Snow removal business is conditionally allowed in the neighborhood commercial zoning district, and a snow removal business with a seasonal contractor's yard is a conditionally allowed use in the rural residential zoning district. So conditional uses are land use activities that may be desirable and compatible with adjacent land uses, but require additional review for the particular location. And the purpose of the use permit review is to evaluate the proposed use to determine if the activity should be allowed on the subject site. In order to approve the use permit, including an amendment to the existing use permit, there's a required set of findings, including that the proposed use is compatible with existing and future land uses in the vicinity. So through the previous use permit approvals for Snowtech and Waltman, the Commission and Council found the sites were appropriate for the proposed uses and adopted findings and conditions of approval for each project. We've gone through all of the conditions of approval for all of the previous projects with help from engineering to determine which ones are still applicable, and incorporated all of those into the draft resolution, and proposed some new conditions that we thought were necessary to ensure that the project is in compliance with our current standards. So we recommended a set of findings that was included with the resolution to support the land use approval, and it's our opinion that the findings can be made with incorporation of the recommended conditions. The current proposal proposes to, like I said, not only combine the 2 approvals into 1 use permit that reflects the current operations, but also to do some amendments to the Panamint Place site. The applicant's requesting to add defensible space and painting staining services to increase the amount of approved equipment. What was in the application submittal was 12 additional pieces of snow removal equipment, 2 additional pieces of driveway sealing equipment, 6 trucks and trailers for defensible space, and 12 trucks and trailers for painting and staining, and increase the on-site fuel storage by 9,000 gallons. So the applicant's justification letter explained that that's the reasonable amount of additional services that they would like to request to accommodate growth and to provide expanded services to meet the market demands. So this was a table that was included in the staff report that talks about the different types of equipment at the Northwoods and Panamint sites and the increases, and then some explanation from the applicant on what the reason for those increases is. In terms of general plan consistency, the designation for both sites is the Tahoe Donner Plan area. which allows build-out of the land uses put in place for Tahoe Donner prior to town incorporation, and that includes neighborhoods serving commercial uses. So with the previous approvals for both projects, the council and commission determined the projects were consistent with the general plan. The 2025 general plan was in effect at the time of the 2009 approvals for the projects and remains in effect today. Since the company merger, the Elements has continued to provide services primarily to the Tahoe Donner subdivision and adjacent neighborhoods. So one of the recommendations that we included in the staff report was to consider modifying the service area and reporting requirements that were in the conditions of approval for the Panamint Place site, but not included in the conditions for the Northwood site. So there was some discrepancy between how those two conditions of approval were imposed on the two different projects. So based on how they've operated for the past 11 years and the likelihood that the primary location for their customers will continue to be that area that they've operated in, we're suggesting that potentially we could modify the service area and the annual reporting requirements, and have the annual reporting requirement changed to a requirement where they would provide documentation at the discretion of the community development director on more of an as-needed basis. But that's something the commission can talk about whether you think that's appropriate. So in staff's opinion, the operational changes to provide additional services and equipment are consistent with the previously approved uses and would allow the business to provide additional services to the Tahoe Donner subdivision and surrounding neighborhoods. In terms of site suitability, the operational changes would all occur at Panamint Place, which is a 10-acre parcel. As you can see from that diagram, the town boundary is right along, it's kind of hard to see. You've got the Tahoe Donner subdivision, and then you've got kind of this property at the very edge of it, where Nevada County jurisdiction would start. There's other large acreage parcels that surround it. The applicant owns this parcel that's immediately to the west. And there are some slopes on the property. There's screening provided by the existing trees, so it's not very visible from the public road, and it's accessed by Ski Slope Way to Teton Way, and then from there, private driveway, which is Panamint Place. Site suitability, the subdivision of the site into two parcels that was approved through the previous tentative map. Once the parcel map's recorded for that, the operational facilities would be on a approximately 5-acre parcel to the north, which they called Parcel B, and the residential structures would be located on the 5-acre parcel to the south, which is Parcel A. So you can see from that site plan where the building and parking area and how it's accessed for the new building that's currently in plan check. So once that's built, then there would be indoor storage for the majority of the snow removal equipment, but outdoor storage would be needed to accommodate the additional snow removal equipment and the trucks and trailers for the other services. So the applicant team put together an exhibit, which is shown here, is also in the staff report, showing where they're proposing to put those outdoor storage areas. So you can see the new building would be here. They're proposing to actually locate them on the Parcel A, which is currently, I believe, where they are storing the equipment. But the applicant could potentially speak more to why they chose these particular locations. I believe that's because that's where existing storage is occurring. So one of the things that engineering and planning looked at with this is how big of an area would be needed for the amount of equipment that's currently proposed, with the idea that if we were to approve a defined area, we wouldn't necessarily need to monitor the exact number or type of pieces of equipment, and that would give the applicant the flexibility to use that space. But in order to move in that direction, then we would want to make sure that that's the right size. And there wasn't really enough detail on this exhibit for us to know if this was the right size for what's proposed. So we recommended that a grading permit be required. And as part of that, have a more detailed exhibit. There were some criteria that was listed in that condition of approval that would provide more justification for the size of the outdoor storage areas. And then we would have the town engineer and community development director approve that at the staff level for the final plan if the commission's comfortable with that approach. There were some other recommendations for where those outdoor storage areas should go. We recommended that they should be outside the setbacks, outside any areas of 20% slopes or greater, since any disturbance of those slopes would require an additional use permit approval, and that all areas where vehicles will park or maneuver should be paved, which would ensure compliance with the current town standards. We have a state stormwater permit, and then the current engineering division and development code standards that talk about operating vehicles and storing equipment and materials on unpaid paved surfaces. So we recommend paving those areas to be in compliance with all of those different standards. And existing nonconformities with vehicles that are currently parking on the dirt, to require that to be brought into compliance within some reasonable timeframes. So what was included in the condition was December 31st, 2020 to submit the grading permit and then install the improvements prior to October 15th, 2021. The applicant would prefer not to do the paving, but if that is imposed on the project, they would prefer a longer time frame, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. In terms of neighborhood compatibility, we received a public comment letter from a property owner who lives over on Ski Slope. They were concerned that additional storage and use of equipment could raise fire risks, reduce visibility of the forested area behind their home, and increase the use of forest for riding motorcycles and ATVs. So the town's code compliance officer has never received any complaints about the current business at the Panamint Place site, and Tahoe Donner HOA submitted a comment letter supporting the proposed project amendment. In terms of ensuring that the neighborhood compatibility is maintained, we recommended conditions of approval, some of which were in the previous resolutions that address noise and other potential neighborhood impacts, and incorporated all of those into the new resolution. So based on the fact that there's not any development that's in close proximity to the existing site, and the fact that it's currently used for snow removal and seasonal contractor operations, we don't anticipate any additional significant impacts based on the increase of services and equipment. The applicant, after reading through the staff report, asked me to make a few clarifications and some suggested changes. There was discussion about an existing slash pile on the property, which the neighbor who submitted the public comment had some concerns about that as a fire risk. The applicant wanted it to be known that that's been resolved, that they had that removed. According to them, the business has been in operation at that site since 1979, and Snowtech was in operation since 1999. The outdoor vehicle storage, they don't believe it's non-conforming because in 2009, vehicles were allowed to be stored outside. They would like to keep one storage container on parcel A and the railroad car on parcel B. The previous conditions of approval required all of the temporary storage containers to be removed once the new building was constructed. So on rural residential parcels that are over 5 acres, one cargo container is allowed. So if the commission wanted to modify condition 21 to allow that, that could be a potential modification. As I mentioned, they request that the paving requirement not be imposed for the outdoor storage, and if it is required, they would like the deadlines to be December 21st, 2021 to submit the grading permit and complete the work by October 15th, 2022. That would be condition 23 that would be modified. And they also wanted to clarify that the 20,000 gallon fuel storage wouldn't all be in one tank. There was language in the previous conditions of approval that required the existing fuel tanks on parcel A to be removed when they installed the new fuel tank. They said due to the fact that different types of fuel are required for the different vehicles, they would need to have more than one tank for that amount of fuel storage. So that might be something that the commission might want to consider modifying and potentially ask the applicant for a little more information on how that would work. The use permit findings are here in case we want to refer to them. Environmental review, we're recommending that the CEQA exemptions for existing facilities, section 15301, and the general rule exemption, which is section 15061B3, apply to the project. And our recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2020-12, determining the project exempt from CEQA per sections 15301 and 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines, and approving the project amendment to combine the previously approved use permits for Waltman Construction and Snowtech, and approve the proposed modifications to the operations on the Panamint Place site based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. The Commission could choose to continue the hearing, require additional environmental review if you don't find that the exemptions are appropriate. You could add, modify, or eliminate any of the conditions of approval, or you could deny the project approval if you find that the findings can't be made. And if you take action, the appeal period is ending on July 31st, 2020 at 5 p.m.
Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, and do we have Jamie Legary from Elements Mountain Company for the presentation with us tonight?
Jamie's here to answer questions.
Jamie's here to answer questions.
But not give a presentation.
Not give a presentation. Okay, great. So reminder, if you'd like to submit public comment, please call or text 530-428-6555 or email planningdepartment@townoftruckee.com. Okay, we'll move into commission clarifying questions for staff. Susie, what commission clarifying questions do you have for staff?
As always, I have a bunch. Do you want to start with somebody else to give them a chance?
No, I'd like you starting because you seem to get most of our questions because you're so thorough.
Well, thank you. All right. Okay, we're going to jump right into the sticky ones. For staff. So, can you tell me what the original intent of the rural residential zoning district was as described in the code section 18.08020A?
Sure. So the rural residential zoning is primarily intended for larger acreage parcels for residential uses, but there are uses that are allowed in the code on rural residential zoned parcels, including the snow removal and the contractor yard.
And so when you say larger, is there a specific number written in that code?
There's different densities.
Written in section 18.08.020A.
Specific parcel sizes?
I think we might need a second to look up the actual code if that's what you're trying to ask.
So the definition says, well, it talks about density with minimum area of 5 acres for each dwelling unit.
Thank you.
Is that what you were looking for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that has been my impression of what rural residential is one residence on a large piece of property. So right below that, in that same piece of code, what is the general density for the, what is the allowable density for the RS, or the single-family residential district?
So allowable densities range from 0.5 to 4 dwelling units per acre. Is that what you're looking at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So this density that we now have, this rural residential, is 0.67, which actually falls in this allowable density for the single family. I just wanted that to be clear. So how many other properties do you think are zoned rural residential 0.67 in Truckee?
I know that there are some around Glenshire. I'm not sure if they're part of the Glenshire subdivision or part of Cambridge Estates. I know I've seen a number of parcels over there that have that same density and zoning designation. I'm not sure about elsewhere in town.
I mean, there are parcels that are designated RR that are slightly less than an acre all the way up to, in some cases, 20. So I would say there's probably a pretty wide range in parcel sizes and densities within this designation.
And so how many do you think are zoned that 0.67 or lower?
RR 0.67.
That's what this one is zoned, RR 0.67.
And you're basing that on two units and in a 10-acre parcel?
That's what's listed in our staff report.
So I don't know if we can tell you off the top of our heads how many parcels in town are zoned rural residential.
I'm just trying to get an estimate. Is there a lot of them that are that small that are still zoned rural residential? Are we talking 10? Are we talking 100? Just no idea.
I don't know.
Okay. I tried to communicate this question beforehand because, anyway, but
I mean, the zoning was changed and the subdivision was approved with the previous approval, so those aren't part of the current project.
Right, but the density of this use is part of the current project. Is it common to have one use permit covering two different locations? Are there pros and cons of this action?
Well, the pros for this situation is that it's now one company that's operating both sites, so it makes sense for them. I suppose a con would be if they wanted to sell one of the locations at some point, then they would operate under the combined use permit unless they came in to ask for an amendment to separate it again.
Just to follow up on that, looking at Laura's staff report a little more clearly, I would say RR 0.67 is probably not one of the more common rural designations. We usually see kind of 1 acre or 5 acre or larger. So we probably don't have a ton of those in the town, but they're definitely there. As to the question about is it common to have a use permit that sort of extends between two different properties, I'd say that's probably not common, though there isn't anything in our understanding that would preclude having a consolidated use permit. And we actually think it makes sense for a number of reasons, not the least of which is simplicity for both the operator and us in monitoring it.
Got it. Great. Thank you for that. So can you describe the existing fuel tanks on both sites, the planned fuel tanks already approved, and then the fuel tank increase? So we already talked about they're going to have different tanks. Do we know how many? There's 3 existing fuel tanks. Are they being moved and used? Do we know?
My assumption was that those were going away when the new fuel tank was to be installed, but based on the information that the applicant has provided, it sounds like that's not what they have in mind. So I think it would be good to ask Jamie what she's anticipating.
Okay, I will ask that of the applicant as well. Oops. Scroll down. Okay, I'm sorry, I have hard questions for this one. So one of our findings state that no changes have occurred in the character of the 2 project sites or their surroundings. And I'm just wondering, at what point do we formally acknowledge that changes in the surroundings are being produced by global warming and rising fire danger?
So I think that what that's looking at is physical changes to the site. I don't, as far as I know, think we've taken global warming and fire danger into consideration to make that finding. I'm not sure if the general plan, if they're planning to address those issues with the general plan update, is something that we would look at with future projects.
Laura's correct. We've always interpreted that finding to be a physical change in the vicinity. Certainly that'll be a potential discussion in our general plan. That would mean if there were changes in our general plan related to that, we'd have to amend the development code findings as well, and that would be in the future.
Okay. I'm still struggling to see the difference between physical changes and wildfire danger due to drought, which is a physical change, but I will move on. Okay, so it talks about the anticipated build-out of Tahoe Donner as a subdivision. It's going to result in 7,000 homes. Do we know what the current number of homes is?
I asked the chief building official if they have data on that through the building permit, and he said they don't. I did look in a previous annual report that was put out to see if there was data in there based on each subdivision build out, and I wasn't able to find that information, so I don't know if that's something we've tracked.
I vaguely remember working on a couple Tahoe Donner projects a couple years ago, and it was about 6,500, I believe. So you could argue it's gone up incrementally in the last couple of years, but that's probably a good ballpark. And those are figures that have come directly from the association, but again, it's a little bit outdated.
Okay, so you're saying then that we have somewhere around 500 left to get to that 7,000?
Plus or minus, yeah.
Rough estimate. And when was that Tahoe Donner plan created? Do you know what year that was sort of drawn out?
Are you talking about the plan area in the general plan?
The Tahoe Donner...
Or the subdivision itself?
As a subdivision, when they split that up into properties and sort of planned on this 7,000, do we know when that was?
I believe it was in the 70s.
Prior to the town's incorporation.
Okay, and that's still incorporated into our current general plan 2025, correct?
As the estimated build out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is just a checking on something. The Northwoods is only allowed to have the snow removal services. Any of the other secondary and ancillary services are at Panamint only, correct? And the Northwoods shuts down for the summer?
Right, that's what was in the previous approvals, and they're not proposing any changes to the Northwoods operation.
Okay, I think you had a slide of the CEQA exemptions. Can you pull that up again, or? Okay. So there was another sentence after this one on the 15301 existing facilities, and I don't see it.
After you mentioned that you might have CEQA questions, so let me get that language.
Thank you.
So for existing facilities, it says it consists of operation, repair, maintenance, permitting, leasing, licensing, or minor alteration of existing public or private structures, facilities, mechanical equipment, or topographical features involving negligible or no expansion of existing or former use. And then it goes on to have a long list of examples.
Okay, the one I pulled up had a sentence that started with the key consideration. Is that not in the actual code?
Key consideration is whether the project involves negligible or no expansion of use.
Okay. I feel that is an important sentence that I am, thank you, appreciative that you could bring that up and highlight it for me. Okay. So, I asked you this one earlier. If parcel A outdoor storage area is paved, does it still meet the rural residential requirement for a maximum of 40% site coverage, including house, barn, and outdoor storage?
The exhibit that was prepared didn't have a site coverage calculation, as far as I'm aware, but that's something that would need to be in the grading permit when it's submitted for the paving of those areas. So that's something we would be looking at. But if you wanted to make it explicit in the condition, we did include language about being located outside setbacks and outside the slope. So there could be language that is explicit that they would have to meet site coverage requirements as well.
Okay, so if it doesn't meet that maximum, if it's more than 40%, what happens with the project?
So what we proposed was having the town engineer and community development director make the ultimate decision on the final plan, so they could require it to be smaller to meet the site coverage requirements. Otherwise, I suppose they would have to ask for a variance or a plan development to exceed the code standard for site coverage. But that would be a whole other process they would have to go through.
Okay. So for condition of approval number 7, it mentions a lot of the code that they need to comply with. It doesn't actually mention our design guidelines. And so I'm curious, what design guidelines is this required to comply under? Is it required to comply with residential, because that's the zoning, or industrial?
Well, the building was already approved, so there wouldn't be architectural guidelines that would be required for the project. It would be more of a question of site design. And I think we would impose the commercial standards for site design rather than residential. That seems like that would make more sense since it's a commercial operation.
Okay, so parking lots are required to have vegetation islands at certain intervals. I think it's mentioned in condition approval 39. Is this considered a parking lot? Would these need to be incorporated into the outdoor storage area? And again, can we request that mature trees are preserved to the greatest extent possible to provide shading and heat mitigation?
So condition 39 was one of the original conditions for that site for when the building is constructed. I tried to separate out the newer conditions under other conditions of approval to make it engineering, and I thought that would be a little clearer on which ones were previous and which ones are new. So that landscaping requirement would have been required for the parking lot that they were approved for. This storage area would be a little different since it would be just equipment storage, so I don't think we would impose the interior landscaping requirements for parking lots on a contractor's storage area. That could have difficulty with maneuvering vehicles and things like that.
Okay. Yes, I did not catch that was for the parking lot for the building and the other parcel. Do you know anything about the condition of approval 37 that requires the installation of 2 fire hydrants? Has that happened yet? It says may include in the condition of approval. What does that mean?
So that's another condition that was required with the previous project approval. Looks like that was a Truckee Fire Protection District requirement. So it just says the project shall comply with all the Truckee Fire ordinances and requirements. I'm not sure if when they're reviewing the current building permit, if that's their current standard that they would be imposing, or if maybe they have different requirements now since it's been 11 years since this was written.
Yeah, this is sort of older language, excuse me, that we used to use based on initial feedback from the fire department. So I think this is standard and formulaic that would show up on all projects in this era. I believe this has now changed. There's a different fire marshal in place, and they've kind of altered their approach. So I think this is just standard language that they used to impose.
Okay, so there's not an actual requirement of 2 fire hydrants that may just...
I don't think it's an actual requirement for this project. Again, this would have shown up on any project in that era.
Okay, that is all my questions.
Commissioner Freeman.
No, Susie hit all my questions.
Commissioner Miller.
She didn't get all of mine. So just to clarify, there are operations in Northwoods, there are operations here. Are operations actually moving out of Northwoods?
They're not proposing any changes to what they're currently doing at the Northwood site.
But the paint and stain vehicles it mentions it makes sense to move those to the Panamint site.
Oh, right. The applicant said that they were leasing some space on West River for that business, that part of their business, and they want to move that to the Panamint
So a third site.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Also, there's a parcel just to the east. What uses are permitted there?
The parcel to the east is in the county, and so I wasn't able to look up the zoning or whether it's residential. Do you have any idea what those?
I can ask the applicant, that's fine. Also, speaking of how things have changed and what we're trying to anchor there, is it possible, off the top of your head, to speak to the population change in the development since the last permit was issued? I know we're working towards that 7,000, but just a general sense of proportion.
That's a tough one because Taudonner is a predominantly second homeowner community, though obviously we all have some anecdotal evidence that may be changing lately. I think that would be really hard for us to say. There's been sort of the same pace of development that we've seen over time generally in the town. It's generally pretty slow. We always generally have about the same number of new home starts. That the two of you up there might know better some of the numbers that we're looking at. But it's been fairly gradual, and this is about an 11-year-old permit at this point. So it's not a tremendous amount of growth that we've seen.
Okay, got it. And my last small set of questions are about the slash pile. Just maybe this is more appropriate for the applicant, but clearance and just where in the site is that? I sort of missed that in the map.
It wasn't shown on the map. I'm not sure exactly where that was, but the applicant could explain that. It sounded like they were doing some site work and had a piece of equipment coming to remove it, and it broke down, so it took some time to fix it. But she could provide additional info on that.
Okay, cool. No further questions.
Okay, do we have commission clarifying questions for the applicant, Susie?
I actually forgot one for the staff.
Well, fire away.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Do we have any indication of where slopes exceed 20% on this property?
There was a survey that was prepared with the previous approval, and I did look at that. It looked like where they're proposing these areas are outside of where they were shown on that survey.
Okay, and then the Waltman, the person who owns the whole Elements now, was the original owner of the Waltman or the original owner of the Snowtech, or both?
Waltman, and then they combined with the owner of Snowtech.
So both original owners are still part of the company?
I believe it's just the Waltman owner is now the owner of both, but Jamie could confirm that.
Okay. Okay, so...
With that, why don't you just go right into the questions for the applicant?
Okay, let me see. Okay. Do we have her? Is she there? She, he, anyone?
She's here.
She, okay.
Jamie, can you hear us?
Did I just successfully unmute myself?
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Great.
Welcome.
Okay, so with 20,000 gallons of fuel on site at Panamint and possibly 1,000 gallons, I think it was 1,000, at the Northwood site, what is the danger to neighbors, to wildlife, for either catastrophic spill events or chronic leakage events? Do you have spill plans, firefighting plans, and maintenance plans?
Correct. We do have all of the above because of the, well, first of all, let me answer your initial question that staff didn't know the answer to regarding the 3 existing tanks that we have. Those are all going to be replaced with newer style tanks that have a lot more safety measures put into place with them as far as more containment area and things like that. So we will be replacing the old tanks with new tanks. The reason why I wanted to clarify the word tanks plural is we do use gasoline, red diesel, and clear diesel. So getting a 20,000 gallon 3 compartmentalized tank would be a special order that would be of significant cost versus just purchasing more of a standard style fuel tank that may be either single compartment or dual compartment, still with all the same double containments and all the same regulations, and just be a better way to go. That will also allow us more flexibility, if we were wanting to change up which fuel we were storing more of or not, although diesel is the one that we would definitely be more concerned about so that we don't run out of fuel with all of the tractors. As far as your initial question, we are regulated by Nevada County Environmental Health. We, submit to them yearly. They do site inspections for us on their regular rounds, and so we're always part of their site inspections. We have a spill prevention and containment plan, an SBCC plan that's specifically designed for our site that we are already prepared to modify when we have our new building completed that you guys are aware of, but I know not discussing necessarily tonight because it was already approved. So we have a modification plan for that as soon as it all gets completed.
And just two follow-up questions on that. How often is that inspection? And then is there something in the plan about wildfire?
So right now at our site, we actually have a 5,000-gallon water tank. And I was trying to look at our plans quickly as you were asking about the 2 fire hydrants. And I couldn't find what that, if that was on there or not. I know that during this building permit process over the last 5 months since we submitted it in December, or I guess that's now 7 months, time flies. The fire department has been involved with it, as well as the PUD for water flow. We're having to bring in a larger water line, an 8-inch line from Ski Slope all the way along Teton to the project site to increase water flow. And I just couldn't find specifically if it said, 1 or 2 or 8 fire hydrants. I didn't see that in there. And like I said, right now up at the current Panamint site, we have a 5,000-gallon water storage tank that the fire department is aware of. My husband's a firefighter, so he's there. They sometimes fill up the tank for us. Other times we fill it up ourselves, but the fire department is aware and it has the correct fitting on it for them to be able to hook up to.
And is there a special procedure for a fuel tank if a wildfire is coming that way?
Well, our bulk storage is diesel, and that's not flammable like gasoline is in the movies. So, it's not treated necessarily the same way.
Oh, thank you. I had no idea. And then the inspections are annual?
Our reviews with environmental health are annual. It's up to them if they want to come out every year or not. Ironically, next week is our review with them for this year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on.
One clarifying thing, you had asked about the Northwood site during the summertime. That's where all of our admin team works out of. So there is admin team always still there. Some of the equipment, as you see, is stored there. So we have some mechanic staff who work there on site to, snow removal equipment is extremely fickle and it needs to be working really well during the season. So we're working on that year round. So the site doesn't completely close up. It has admin staff as well as mechanic staff. And then also the clarifier, another one was, yes, there is the previous Snowtech owner is my business partner. So we are both still, the 2 previous Snowtech and Waltman are both still involved with Elements today.
Great, thank you. So I was under the impression that the numbers that were in the report, the 90%, 90% of the business done in Tahoe Donner was for the whole Elements company, but I think that was just for the Panamint site. Does the whole company meet the same percentages?
Yeah, if you look in the staff report, let me find that page real quick, but I had provided numbers back to, I think, 2016, or I've provided them for a long time, but they're in here back to 2016, and those were for the whole company. The Northwood site had never had that restriction before, and the paint and stain services came from the original Snowtech that would have been the Northwood site. And they never had that restriction or limitation put on them. However, as you can see, the vast majority of their clients for the jobs were still in Tahoe-Donner anyway. It's extremely expensive to operate out of Tahoe-Donner versus if we could just do commercial property in town. And so, as I've described to the planning department, we wouldn't be spending all this money to operate up in Tahoe-Donner to then go out and service, everybody in Glenshire. It just wouldn't make sense. With the snow removal company, we want to be where we are going to be operating and the group that we're going to be with. And, we've asked for equipment increases, not only because of growth in that community, but also because of increased levels of demand of service. I've had quite a few discussions with Dan Wilkins, the Director of Public Works, and, he will echo that same thing. As every year that goes by, the level of demand of service increases and increases, and you can't keep up with that with just the same amount of equipment. In other words, the same amount of fuel storage, the same amount of anything. So, in order to meet up with this market demand, that's why we're coming to the table with some of these requests.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I don't, if you can't answer this, then just let me know, but what is the reason to subdivide this property if there is still shared storage?
So keep in mind, we also did all of that back in 2009. So, 11 years ago, when we originally did this, there was no merged companies. It was the two separate companies. And at the time, 11 years ago, the goal would have been to have everything on parcel B and where the new building site is. And, the thought would always be whenever the time frame is in the future, I have 3 kids, but who's to say that any of them will ever want anything to do with this business? At some point along the way, if we wanted to sell the building, then it could be all separate. It would be a separate parcel. When we went through the 2009 process, I think we had 5 major agenda items, and just splitting the 2 lots into 2 ended up being a good suggestion. So we went along with that. It's definitely going to increase property taxes and things like that I don't like. So, from a short-term perspective, or forever, if it's still me doing both of them, it might be a foolish decision, but, maybe long-term it's a better decision.
Okay, because if this happens and there's storage from one on the other, there will have to be sort of concessions made, and
I think that's part of one of the conditions, that if either parcel sells, that we have to go back through the planning department to have the use permit amended.
Okay, and it's still worth it for you?
Yes. I believe there's even a deed restriction or something like that. I can't remember if there was actually even a deed restriction, but I'm fully aware of that, and know that, if either parcel A or parcel B ever changes ownership, that the Elements business will have to come to a different use permit through modification.
Okay, great. And then what's the plan for the 12, or I guess it's not 12, 11 storage units that are coming off the property? Do they get sold? What's in there? Where does that go? Because isn't all the interior space sort of taken up inside the building with vehicles?
Well, right now vehicles all park outside, and that's where I was saying for our outdoor storage, vehicles have always been outside. Those containers would hold tractors typically, which the tractors can then move into the new building. I have no love lost to have all the containers there or not. They're all around my house. I live on parcel A, so, it's all right around my house. And, not having them there, it means I'm not in love with them either way. So having them all move off, they would just be sold. I know some of our employees who live in certain areas would love to have a container if they're allowed to have one. They're not very much money. I mean, we'll just dispose of them to whoever wants them at the time.
Okay, so what's in there now is tractors. The tractors are going in the interior space of the new building, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. And I think there's one more. Okay. Okay, in the plan view of the proposed outdoor storage location, it appears that the outdoor storage parking lot on parcel A is to be constructed on land that has sort of a similar slope to that on parcel B. Is there a reason that we're doing it on A instead of B?
I would disagree with the slope opinion. I think on parcel A, it's fairly flat. We've been using that outdoor storage space, since the building started there, that was one of the clarifiers is that site location has been there since 1986. When we originally started in 1979, it was at a different location, but that site area, we've been using that outdoor storage space. It's in existence. I believe Laura has a Google area photo. I saw it in the staff report. I would love to talk about the outdoor storage space because that's, been my one, challenge isn't even the right word, but, that's been my one concern regarding this process because, if we ever do get the business consolidated all onto parcel B, I'm going to be left with all of this asphalt where if it's just left the way it is, it could easily go back to normal and just, be on natural dirt. Right now, we do a lot of tucking different pieces of equipment and different blower heads between large trees. I imagine if I have to go through a whole grading permit to get the site paved and stuff like that, we're going to be taking out a lot of trees. And, right now, a lot of it's not visible. I know I sent Laura some photos of the site area at one point, and I don't know, in my opinion, it would just be a shame to change it from what it is now. We're not creating dust for neighbors. We're not tracking dirt from, the tire marks, out onto any public roads. As you mentioned on the previous agenda item, more pavement creates heat, creates a lot of its own runoff issues. And the way the site sits now, it doesn't have any of that. It's a lot nicer to be around. And obviously the goal would be to consolidate outdoor space into the new building as much as we can. But the reality is we are not in a business that we can go and buy spare parts places. If we have I have probably 8 to 10 snowblower heads just sitting there that are boneyard pieces that we keep picking off parts on when we need them. We're basically our own pick and pull. We have snow poles that, sit there and they get touched twice a year. We go and we take them all in the fall and put them in the ground, and then we remove them all in the spring, and then they just sit there all year. So, that would definitely be my one request for planning commissioners to really review is that aerial shot that Laura sent, and just to understand with having to make a lot of modifications to the outdoor storage space, that's going to change the look and feel of the site significantly. And it is my house. And, I do like it, that way with the dirt versus a ton of pavement that if we ever sold along the way, or if we ever downsized for any reason, I'd be left with all of this pavement for no reason.
Great. Thank you for that description. And then so I'm sorry, you said you are familiar with what the fire hydrant requirement was, but you couldn't quite find it or something?
I'm saying our building plans are, I don't know from our civil engineering plans. I know that during this whole process over the last 7 months with the building department that, the fire department has reviewed everything again. And I just don't know off the top of my head if there's 1 or 2 hydrants or not.
Okay, but you think you're installing, when you bring that 8-inch water line out, you're installing a fire hydrant at least on there?
I would assume so. We're installing whatever they're requiring us. I know part of those requirements are for enough gallons per minute flow for our sprinkler system inside the building itself. And so, I know that that's part of it too.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Freeman, questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just a couple. Is this site on city sewer?
Currently the existing site on parcel A is not. We're on a septic with a leach field. The parcel B will be on sewer, which has been approved, and that is something that we'll be also bringing in from Ski Slope to service parcel B. At this time, we haven't looked at bringing sewer up to parcel A, although it's, something that could be done.
Okay, no, that was actually my real question, was how you were going to service well, I guess I could back up. Are you going to have any bathrooms out here at parcel B, where all the parking is?
Yes. Have you guys, maybe you haven't seen the building plans. It has office space, it has multiple bathrooms, and it has 2 apartments for employee housing.
Yeah, okay.
So yes, it will have bathrooms too.
So to be clear on the fuel tanks, the 3 existing tanks go away and you replace that with 3 new tanks. That's a total of 20,000 gallons.
3 or 2 new tanks, yes.
Okay.
Can we clarify that the new tanks, Jamie, would those be on parcel B?
Correct. They're designed to be on parcel B.
Okay. We'll need to update that condition of approval if the commission wants to do that.
Okay, got it. Yeah, no, they would move to parcel B. Like I said, the goal is to have almost everything down there except for essentially overflow and, as I described, equipment, boneyard, snow poles, that sort of thing.
And do you have any plans to ever expand outside of Tahoe Donner, or is that unlikely?
We do things outside of Tahoe Donner now, as you could see with our usage reports. It's just that the majority of what we do is in Tahoe Donner.
Okay, that's all I had.
Commissioner Miller, questions for the applicant?
Yes, thank you. I would love to hear just generally your plan and approach on fire risk, just knowing that obviously you're aware of how it works and there are a lot of trees on this lovely map. How do you address that with this expansion?
Sure. Well, like I said, with the building department and civil engineering plans, they're addressing it, and I'm trusting them. To be honest with you, I'm not an expert on water flow engineering, anything like that. I'm an expert on running a snow removal business, so I'm counting on them to be able to tell us what our fire risks are and what we need to do.
Well, that makes 2 of us that aren't experts on that. Thank you. No further questions.
My only question, and mostly just out of my own curiosity, you're not actually your parcel is adjacent to Tahoe Donner, not part of Tahoe Donner, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. We are in the town of Truckee, obviously, but we are not in Tahoe Donner.
Got it. Great. Thank you so much.
Between our parcels and residential parcels on Ski Slope is Tahoe Donner open space.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, at this point, Carissa, do we have any more public comment that has come in since this meeting has started?
Yes, we have. I will just refresh the inbox. No emails. We do, however, have text messages. This is a long one. I'm going to do my best to go through this. Why do they need to combine the use permit? By combining this, it automatically means elements can increase number of trucks coming and going at the Northwoods and Zurich. This impacts traffic noise and safety of the dense population along Zurich, which has many apartments and single-family residents. Since Tahoe Donner already has 6,000 homes built, why do we need so many more trucks? 30 are proposed. If the proposed permit new project allows more trucks and snow removal equipment, how does a combined permit prohibit these trucks from coming onto the Northwoods location? I strongly urge keeping the permits separate for more control of town and residents. How much fuel is currently stored on the Northwoods site? If growth has been gradual and the max of 7,000 is near, why not reduce the amount of allowed equipment 50% from 30 to 15? What fire safety is at Northwoods? Is the fuel at Northwoods gasoline? If the slope proves unacceptable, won't combining the permit allow shift of the parking to Northwoods? Northwoods location is in Tahoe Donner. And then we received one voicemail. This is the voicemail I was reading earlier. I unfortunately am not able to play this. We're having some technical difficulties, but I'm going to do my best to read this transcription that's not quite clear. Says, I'm Sarah Walker, 16-year resident of Truckee. I'm calling regarding APN, and it's clear if I keep reading that she's talking about this project. We're residents off of Zurich Place, and this project is very close to our residents. We want to make sure that the combination of these two permits does not allow the use by elements of the Northwoods address for expansion for a truck. There's already enough action with residents and apartments coming and going on that street. We don't need any more trucks and snow machines making noise and interfering with people's enjoyment of their home. So I'm hoping that you make sure that any development that occurs is limited now and in the future to the Panamint Place location. Thank you. And she gives her address, but it's not readable. And that is all.
Okay, closing public comment, and Ms. Legary, if you'd like to rebut any of those public comments, now's your opportunity.
Sure, I guess one of the things would be the equipment increases are all coming from essentially, or mostly coming from new departments being added onto it. The original SnowTech application did not have paint and stain trucks and trailers listed on them because, as I'd stated, they were renting space out of West River Street. And so we, felt if we were going to be doing them up in Tawadana, it's much less traffic for the Northwoods Hill to move to the Panamint site location, considering, like I said, even last year it was over 80% of the jobs were up in Tawadana. So we're actually reducing traffic by working up and having the site location being up in Tawadana. The other bulk of the equipment being asked for that was new is we started a defensible space department. Defensible space is huge, not only in Truckee but particularly in Tawadana. Last summer, it was frustrating for me to drive, from my house there on Panamint all the way through Tawadana and seeing Auburn, people from Lake Tahoe, everywhere around up there working in Tawadana when we were right there. So, that if that could be displayed, I guess, to our clients around Tawadana, it's actually much less traffic for them if we are to be doing it versus all of this work being done by other subcontractors. And defensible space is very important. You guys talk about fire risk and what we're going to do with that, and defensible space is key. So, we started doing defensible space this year, and that was part of the reason why we started this application process, was because we were adding on some of those new departments and wanted to come and submit to the town to have those actually on our use permit. And those are the main reasons, adding on departments and or services that we're doing to help the Tawadana neighborhood versus companies outside of Tawadana driving into Tawadana.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving into deliberation. Anybody feel like they want to start? Commissioner Miller.
Sure, thank you. In general, I'm pleased to see that these are important essential services. We all want defensible space. We all want our snow plowed. I'm glad to see the space being used more intensely by distributing the work throughout the year to be active year round. I think it's a very appropriate use of the space.
Commissioner Freeman?
I would agree. I think Elements has done a really nice job of building a great local business that provides a ton of local year-round jobs. They've consolidated their work within Tawadana without, like Jamie said, other businesses coming up from Sacramento or from Tahoe or from further away. So they're actually reducing the miles driven to get from, call it the office to the service location. The fact that she actually lives on this property and has for a long time just speaks to me that this is literally her backyard and it's important to her to do it right. I also do agree with her with actually the added paving on the lower parcel there, and looking at that aerial photo, how all the equipment is tucked in between the trees. That sure seems like a much better natural environment than a giant piece of asphalt in the middle of the woods to park all the equipment. I get it, there is stormwater and runoff issues and concerns, and maybe there's some compromise there that we could come to so that we could meet some runoff requirement through dry wells or retention basins or something along those lines. But the idea of leaving, it looks like a lot of trees versus cutting them all down to pave that area, I would be in favor of.
Thanks, Dan. Commissioner Tierney?
Okay, I think this is a big increase in use. It's a 70% increase in equipment here on this piece of property. It's a 30% increase in winter equipment as well. I don't see this as a negligible change in use as required by that CEQA exemption. I'm struggling because I am a big fan of reducing VMT, and I see the value in having this located where it's being used. I'm struggling with this project. It's not negligible. It's a heavy industrial use that has been sort of wedged into a rural residential zoning, and it's making me very uncomfortable. It feels like an end run about something that should have been addressed directly and changed to an industrial parcel at the beginning of this. It's not rural or residential. So it has me very uncomfortable. I feel like it's again, we have to think about the precedent we're setting, and it's not what that zoning was intended for. I am equally conflicted about the paving. You know me, I love trees, and but this is it's not. We have had other projects here that we have not allowed to not pave their storage areas. There is, they don't have a lot of neighbors around them, but I'm sure there is dust every time somebody drives in and out of there. I'm sure that there is silt being washed off. I'm sure that there is erosion. I'm so just very uncomfortable. I think there was one more discussion thing. So talking about the condition of approval number 10, do we want to get rid of that reporting? I think since they're talking so much about reducing those vehicle miles traveled, I think that reporting needs to stay there. I think that this business, if it's up here, it needs to be servicing this area. I don't know. I'm a little. I don't know the numbers, but I can see that, yes, there's a lot of snow in Tahoe Donner. It's going to be expensive to operate there, but it seems like it would be more expensive to have an off-site rental place as well. So I feel like that's kind of a wash as far as that goes. I don't. So those are my issues. I don't see this as a negligible increase in use. 70% more equipment is coming to this with the request for the increase in equipment. I don't feel like more use I feel like the existing use is barely meeting the rural residential. More use is going to be worse. I do think that we need to keep the reporting annually for both sides of the business, North Woods or the Panamint one, that they are, for the most part, 90% doing business in Tahoe Donner if they're locating up there. And I have no idea what to tell you about the paving. I wish we don't have anybody from engineering to talk to us about that.
We do actually. Scott Mathot is on the call remotely, and he could speak to the state stormwater permit requirements that we have to meet. We don't want to jeopardize that permit with the state, and also to the engineering and development code requirements for paving for this type of project.
I would like to hear him.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So so this project falls under a regulated project under the state stormwater permit that the town is the permit holder for. It's the municipal separate storm sewer system permit that's granted to the town by the state agency. And as regulated projects come through the town for approval, the town is required to implement certain measures on site to prevent. Typically, it's sedimentation, but in this case, it's the potential pollutant discharge from the parking and equipment storage areas. So, this being a regulated project, as again a parking and a equipment storage area, those certain site measures need to be implemented in place. One of them being paving the area for pollution control.
So one thing that Scott and I talked about was that the areas where equipment maneuvers and parks needs to be paved, but Scott indicated if there's non-vehicle equipment or materials storage, that potentially that could be a non-paved surface. So that could be an area where there could be some flexibility.
Okay, and that's something that could be addressed at the staff level, right? When they go through the grading permit process?
Yeah.
Right, okay. I mean, I echo the sentiments of, yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act, right? You know, I mean, we want to avoid the heat islands, right? But we also want to make sure that we're not polluting our waterways. So I think we have consensus on the dais that we could leave that up to staff to try and figure out what is the best way to achieve both those goals. Okay.
Is the applicant at all amenable to moving it to that other site where it appears part of that is clear cut anyway for that power line? Or is that where the parking lot is for the, it's hard to tell the difference between the picture and the plan.
Yeah, this area up here is where the new building is going to go. I'm not sure if there would be space in there to add additional vehicle storage. Maybe Jamie could speak to that.
Did I successfully unmute again?
Yes, we can hear you.
As far as that goes, it was just something that, we have existing areas that are already in use. And so, with the cost of the building, it's not cheap. And so just to try to use as much existing things that we already have would be preferred at this stage of the game. But as we're talking about it, that's one of the reasons why I requested farther out dates than what was suggested or imposed on the conditions. With the goal of that being, we'd like to have the building completed by next fall and be moving into it. And then I would like a year with all of the seasons that we're working on to try out the building and its space and how we can best utilize it before we designate maybe larger than necessary outdoor space. And so, with pushing those dates out per what I had sent to Laura's suggestions, it gives us time to have the building completed and then be able to see what we need, what we don't need, what fits where on parcel B before we pave and do a bunch of things on parcel A.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Scott was amenable to the date extension, so maybe he could confirm that that's the case from his perspective.
Yeah, so, the site's being utilized in its existing format currently, running on natural soil. So I think that it would be reasonable to.
We lost you.
Scott, can you repeat that, please?
I can't hear you.
Okay, Scott, we can't hear you. So if you could repeat that. There you go. Can you repeat your last statement there, please?
Yeah, sorry. So I was going to say that I think that it could be beneficial to everyone, the town and the applicant, to hold off until the service is provided with the building, because it'll likely end up that they'll probably require less storage than they may go out and construct now if we require them to do it at a shorter time frame, because it might be a bit of fear planning at that stage to get as much as they can rather than what they actually need.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott. So, sounds like we might be close to consensus on this.
Can I check in with you guys on one thing?
Sure thing, Susie.
Do you, how do you guys feel about that? I think it's condition of approval number 10. Do you want to keep the annual reporting on where the business contracts are taking place, or do you want to make that reporting only necessary if it's asked for by the staff?
I'm fine leaving that, especially if it kind of reassures you. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think that's probably pretty easy data for the applicant to come up with. They should be able to compile, pretty easily where their contracts are.
I have a question for Susie. So the delineation of, is it a negligible increase in intensity? Does it, first question, is the permit that we're supporting, does it specify the distribution of types of vehicles? Because my read on this was the level of intensity in the winter is perhaps negligible, and certainly more is happening in the summer, but that amount is not much more than is happening in the winter. So it sort of distributes, but doesn't, it's not a double, it's not a 70% increase at the same time, is what I'm trying to say.
A spike
in
usage.
Thank you. Yeah.
Regardless of whether the equipment is in use, it is a 70% increase of equipment stored on these properties. And so I see what you're saying, and I understand that sort of evening out your usage across the year. What's also, giving me heartburn is if they're required to pave that, again, that's an intensity of use that's not there. And just, I can't find that it's negligible.
And the general plan indicates that this is meant to be rural residential, not just the current zoning.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Sorry, the general plan as well as the current zoning indicates this land is intended to be rural residential, or at that level of intensity.
Yeah, well, the general plan designation is the Tahoe Donner Plan area, so it's not commercial or residential. And it did have neighborhood serving commercial uses as something that was encouraged within that plan area. And then the council obviously added things to the code to allow for this type of use on this particular property.
So it's the proposed level of intensity and type of use is consistent with the Tahoe Donner Plan.
Yeah, we feel like bringing the site into compliance with the standards for the parking and addressing the drainage and possible pollutants, that's an improvement that the project overall, we can say that the findings could be made for consistency.
Okay, thank you. How does that feel?
Yeah, sorry. I'm really sorry. I just don't feel comfortable saying that it's a negligible change in use.
You don't have to be sorry. Yeah.
I think that she sounds like a lovely person, and I understand, and I'm very conflicted because I understand wanting to have those stored where you use them, and I am a big fan of not driving cars back and forth if you can do it. I just, to me, it feels like a town council made a very specific decision and changed the zoning of this and changed the definition of the zoning and changed the uses that could go in that definition. They made some very specific things, and I feel like this is just pushing beyond where that was, and I'm not even comfortable with what they did. So, yep.
So it's a bridge too far for Susie. Is anybody ready to make a motion, or are we getting close? What do you think?
What would be involved in rezoning the land as industrial to meet the current and proposed use?
That would be really, really difficult.
Good summary, thank you.
I think I see this as an opportunity for us to a little bit manage the demand in Tahoe Donner for defensible space, driveway sealing, painting, and snow plowing versus the guy who has 2 trucks in his driveway who's like painting houses and spilling paint, or the guy who does defensible space out of his driveway and is gassing up his chainsaws and spilling fuel on the ground. And I just see a lot of small businesses that maybe aren't forced to adhere to the same level that a larger business is. And I see this as an opportunity to take a large business that's really they're growing to meet a demand. I mean, there is the demand that's there, and they're meeting that demand. That's why they're growing. They're doing a good job at it, and this is like an opportunity to say, okay, this is a unique property. This is a unique situation. It's a unique business. They really are servicing this community of Tahoe Donner, and this kind of gives us the opportunity to put some stipulations in place that we couldn't do on a smaller scale for the guy who's working out of his driveway or has one truck. So I actually see this as kind of a good opportunity for us to raise the bar a little bit. And then I'm ready to make a motion.
There we go.
Before you go into the motion, can I just summarize the notes I was taking to make sure that I got all this right for what the modifications to the conditions you're proposing? So condition 10, keep the annual reporting requirement. Condition 21, I don't think you discussed specifically the request to keep one storage container on parcel A and the railroad car on parcel B. If the commission's okay with that, we could modify that language. Condition 23, we would change the dates to the 2021, 2022 dates. In condition 26, as instead of one 20,000 gallon fuel tank, it would say 2 or 3 tanks for a total of 20,000 gallons of fuel storage.
So that included the time extension on the outdoor storage, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the shipping container and the railroad car.
Is it one container and one railroad car?
Right, one on each parcel.
And there's 11 now they're getting rid of?
I think there might be more than 11.
But the keeping the one on each parcel is allowed, correct?
I believe you have to have at least 5 acres. After the subdivision happens, they would have 4.99 for one of those parcels. So, but the railroad car, I don't know that would even be considered a cargo container. That might be different, and that was previously approved to remain, as far as I recall from the previous approval. So that might work.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with those storage containers. I mean, it sounds like their intention is to be a good steward of the environment up there, and that's why they want to build this building and get that stuff indoors. So,
I mean, really, I see this as kind of a cleanup project in a way for the whole operation. Okay, I make a motion to, let's see, do we have the project number in here? Oh, there you go. To adopt the resolution 2020-12 and determine that this project is exempt from CEQA per section 15301 and 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines, and approving the project amendment to combine the previously approved use permit for Waltman Construction and Snowtech and approve the proposed modifications to the operations on the Panamint Place site based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, plus the items you just mentioned.
do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Tarnay,
No.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, let's take a minute.
Just a quick reminder, the appeal period ends on July 31st at 5 p.m.
Okay, that's earlier in the meeting we tabled an item which was the selection of chair and vice chair. Considering we don't have Commissioner Hall here, I'd like to make a motion that we reschedule this for the next meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, moving on. Okay, next, staff reports. Do we hear any staff reports?
None.
Okay, closing staff reports. Informational items.
Yes, this is me. So for next month, you will have selection of vice chair and chair. That's a shocker. And you will also have 2 review items. One will be for the hospital district. This is a fairly substantial project that'll be before your commission. They've got a number of parking lots that they're proposing. That will be the Laura Dabe show once again. And then we will have a use permit for the Clever Minds School, which is proposed to be located on Church Street. So we'll probably have a fairly full agenda that evening. That'll be the only items that we put on that for you. And we're still kind of putting together the September agenda, so we don't quite know yet what that'll look like. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Jenna. Okay, next we have an item for discussion here. 10.2 is discuss our future commission start times. Because we've been starting our virtual meetings at 4, staff would like us to discuss if we want to continue that time frame. What say you?
I like meeting a little earlier than 6. This works for me.
4 is a little too early for me personally. It's kind of hard to wrap the workday and then get into this. I think I would be comfortable with 5. I think that would be a good compromise.
That works.
Sounds good.
Okay. So just so you know, the council is the body that sets timeframes for each of the town's commissions. So what we will do is let the council know that the commission has requested to move really your temporary COVID meeting time from 4 to 5. And we may just look at how we do that, recognizing that our old meetings used to be at 6 and maybe moving it to more permanent time for 5 as long as we're continuing to do the virtual meetings. And we will put that on an upcoming council agenda to get there okay. But that, as far as I understand, it's really just a procedural thing for us to go through.
So we would assume that the next meeting would start at 4 then, until we chat with council.
We may be able to get this on a consent agenda at the next meeting in time for this to happen for August.
Okay, got it. So Carissa will let us know before the next meeting. Very good. Alrighty. Do we have any commission member reports, Susie? Tell us what you've been up to.
What have I been up to? I got to have a lovely conversation with our former town manager and just tried to ask him what balls are still in the air and what should be caught. And the general plan is the consensus there. I had a meeting with, who did I have a meeting with? Becky Bucar about VMT. I took a online class about VMT in July. I met with Becky July 2nd, trying to learn all I can about that. I had a meeting with Yumi Dunn about affordable housing and how it's working on July 16th. And I had a meeting with Anna Klobstad on July 17th. And I watched all the town council meetings.
Thank you, Susie. Commissioner Freeman, anything to report?
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Miller.
I joined the Planning Commission.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I have nothing to report. Okay, and that is it. We are adjourned until August 18th. Start time to be determined pending council action. Thanks, everybody.